Hey folks, welcome back. Time for some more spooky season RPG excellence. This time we're looking at the 20th anniversary edition of Vampire: The Dark Ages. Now, for those of you who watched my previous video on Vampire: The Masquerade 20th anniversary edition, this is along the same lines. However, this book updates the Dark Ages line, which was a kind of subsetting for Vampire: The Masquerade, which took place in medieval times. Now, there was a lot of great stuff released for that line, and personally, I think this 20th anniversary edition is, if anything, even better than V20 for a few reasons, which you'll see as we get into it. But the setting itself is really intriguing. Despite the kind of misnomer, this book is actually set in 1242 AD, which is not really in what we call the Dark Ages historically. It's more about the atmosphere of the name rather than the reality. So when Vampire the Second Edition came out, we had the release of this guy here, which was Vampire the Dark Ages. And this was the first edition of the Dark Ages line. This was set in 1198 AD or thereabouts, and it was an interesting thing to experience. I mean, you got a lot more sort of backstory and ancient history about the different vampire clans. Some of the clans were different, some of the disciplines were different, and of course the environment was very different because back in those days you didn't have phones, you didn't have any sort of artificial light sources, you didn't have large human settlements the way we have today, and particularly out in the countryside, people would be very isolated and often not really move much at all. So it was kind of a good time for vampires. They could hide relatively easily, albeit the wilds were controlled by the lupines, they called them, the werewolves. They could lord over humans relatively easily compared to today, but on the flip side, there were a lot more true believers in the church at that time. And as you know, true faith can cause damage to vampires. If people with true faith wield religious implements against a vampire, that can be a problem. And there are a lot more of those around. Plus, the church itself was running the Inquisition and going after the creatures of the night. And there were also more people in general who believed that vampires were real. So you had a chance of, causing a panic still if you broke what they called the Veil, which was kind of the early version of the Masquerade at the time. And it turned out to be a really popular line. It had a number of supplements for it. And so then when Vampire moved on to Revised Edition, or Third Edition, as you might call it today, we got this book here, which is Dark Ages Vampire. So you notice the name is slightly changed here. It's got a lovely cover, very atmospheric. And this became the centerpiece for a whole line of Dark Ages books for the different monsters types, or splats as the community calls them. So we have Dark Ages Vampire became the core book, which you then needed to play Dark Ages Werewolf, Dark Ages Fae, Dark Ages Inquisitor, which was very cool. So this became the centerpiece of a whole new setting that included other monster types in the World of Darkness besides just vampires. But one thing I would say with the 20th anniversary edition is that the stuff that was released, particularly for Dark Ages Vampire, those supplements and particularly the setting stuff are all completely compatible with DAV 20, as it's called, Dark Ages Vampire 20th Anniversary Edition. So if you're struggling with elements of the setting or getting the historicity feel kind of right, then go back and grab some of the settings and supplements for Dark Ages Vampire and you'll be good to go. In particular, Dark Ages Europe is a good one to get a general overview, and a supplement for Vampire: The Dark Ages called The Three Pillars is a really excellent portrait of medieval life for regular people at that time. So if you want to get the vibe right for how mortals lived during that period, pick up that one as well. But anyway, since these lines were quite popular, they came out with the 20th anniversary of Dark Ages Vampire. Now, much like the 20th anniversary edition of Vampire: The Masquerade, this book does assume a certain level of background knowledge that you've been exposed to the setting before and you've been exposed to Vampire before. So it doesn't necessarily have all the, what's a role-playing game, what is a vampire, how does the setting work stuff that you might expect in core rulebooks elsewhere. What they do is cram in as much updated material as they possibly can within these pages. And there again are a lot of pages, and you can see they've got a lovely silver edge to them as well in this edition. And you can see it looks absolutely lovely on the cover here. We've got this beautiful Ankh. We've got these atmospheric black roses climbing up. We've got the Ankhs again around the corner. And the book's been designed to look like a kind of medieval volume, as you can see here with the edge of the faux leather binding. So we've got V20, but written in a sort of medieval font style. We've got the complete title of the game here, and a lovely Ankh here at the end. Plus we have three silk bookmarks, a silver, red, and black bookmark for your pleasure. So very easy to keep your place when you're looking around the book and referencing different things. Let's just dive in and take a look. You can see on the end papers here, we've got a map of what they call the dark medieval world at the time of this book, drawn in very much a period style. So it really gives you a sense that the political landscape for mortals was very much different at this time, and that in turn has effects on vampires and how they were present and how they were acting at the time. And you can see we've got this cover image here actually appears on the Dark Ages Vampire Storyteller's Companion, which came with the GM screen. So it's a nice little bit of classic artwork there. And you can see we've got a lovely, very detailed table of contents here. Once again, the introduction section is quite short. I mean, just going from pages 12 to 15. Then we have an explanation of setting, the clans, the traditions as they existed at the time, running of cities in the time period. We have some tales of damnation to help you get into the setting, understanding the generations. One thing that's key to know about this game is that you start a bit stronger in this game. So you start at 12th generation when you create a character in Dark Ages Vampire to represent the fact that you're way back in the past. I always personally felt that was a little bit less than generous given the huge time gap between the 13th century or the 12th century and the 21st century. Oftentimes I would give my players an extra dot or two in generation to represent that huge time gap, especially if they wanted to start as not just neonates again, but something with a bit more power, in the Ancilla level. Then we got some enemies and mysteries to talk about, the basic lexicon, details about the clans. We've got bloodlines as well, and there's quite a few here you can see. Then we have roads. So one of the interesting things about the Dark Ages setting is that characters can embark on a number of different roads besides pursuing the Road of Humanity, which was kind of the default for the Camarilla in V20. Here we have a number of different roads, and there are actually great supplements on these roads that were released during the time when Dark Ages Vampire was released, and those are worth picking up if you want to get more into the sort of philosophical backdrops of what some of these vampires were going for. Then we have a character creation chapter at page 144. Again, you got to dig in quite a bit before you get to the actual mechanics. Then chapter 5 is Gifts of the Blood, so that's all the disciplines, and that includes things like blood sorcery, abyss mysticism, Goldunic sorcery, necromancy, thaumaturgy, and even combination disciplines as well. Then at page 320 we have the rules. So again, these are going to be pretty familiar to those of you who know about Vampire the Masquerade Revised or V20. Very, very similar to that, which is a little bit of cleanup, and there's actually a little bit more action taken in this edition to resolve some of the disciplines that were considered problematic, like celerity. Then we get into dramatic systems in chapter 7. Then we move on to the storytelling guide, which is pretty useful here, and there's a nice couple of pages on the true faith, which is very much playing a bigger role, as I said, in this setting. We got some sample ghouls and demons and ghosts as well. And then we got background on the Dark Medieval World. Now we get only about 10 pages on that, so again, I think the Dark Ages Europe supplement, very easily available on PDF, and I think it's on sale right now, actually, for the Halloween sale. So go pick that up. It's well worth having, and a very interesting read. At the end of the video, I'll show you a couple of other books that I own in hardcover that I recommend from the old line, just to supplement your knowledge if you're new to the Dark Ages setting. Appendix A, we have our merits and flaws. Appendix B, we have Apocrypha of the Clans. So we got some interesting background information about the different clans. Yeah, we go up to about a little over 450 pages. Before we get to the index. So it's another dense volume. Again, we have some very cool atmospheric artwork to open up the book, a little bit of introductory fiction. If you read it, which I'm not going to do, you'll note the use of archaic language really kind of gets you into the feel of the whole thing. And in general, I think the graphic design and the layout of this book is an improvement over V20. So that's a really nice thing to see. They say right here, to put it succinctly, you're probably familiar with Vampire, and probably with Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition. You're almost certainly familiar with role-playing games or storytelling games. And so they kind of expect a certain degree of knowledge coming in. If you're brand new to Vampire, if you're brand new to RPGs, you might want to grab a copy of Revised Edition or Dark Ages Vampire, which has a little bit more of a on-ramp, if you like, to the Dark Medieval World and to the world of Vampire in general. So their goals with this were to create a nostalgic experience. So they want to bring back the things people loved about the Dark Ages setting and about Vampire. They want it to feel authentic. So, they set the game in 2042 and it should feel that way, and it should be evocative of that time. And it should also be a new experience. So they want you to be able to dive into the Dark Ages and realize that this is quite a different angle from which to view the experience of being a vampire. They also want to create a unique experience. They want to bring back a lot of the stuff that we love, but also update things so that things work a little bit better, that player feedback over the years have been taken into account, and some of the disciplines and so forth have been cleaned up. But they make clear here in this sidebar, new rules, old rules, that if you're familiar with past editions of the Dark Ages and you prefer the way the disciplines were used back then, go ahead and use them. Freely mix and match stuff from this edition with the old editions, and there's no problem with mixing that stuff together. It's your table, it's your game. And I think that's really important to remember. What they've done here, though, is masterfully create a comprehensive edition of Vampire the Dark Ages and put it all in one place for you and left it as as a toolkit from which you can take or leave whatever you like. So we go through the same stuff we saw in V20 about what is a vampire in this setting. So of course, vampires are immortal, they do drink blood. A vampire's victim doesn't become a vampire unless the vampire chooses to do so through the embrace. Vampires are not demons. Sorry, Buffy fans. Vampires do die in the sun. They don't shy away from crosses or running water unless the person with the cross has true faith, which we'll see later on. Vampires don't die from a stake through the heart, but they do paralyze the vampire, which can be, of course, extremely dangerous. Vampires do have unholy strength and power, depending on the type of vampire. They may also have other powers that you don't expect. Vampires have sex, that's true. And then we get into a little bit more details on some of those aspects. So in 1242, most vampires in Europe believe in the Cain narrative. So they believe that Cain from the Abrahamic Bible killed his brother and was cursed for committing the first murder. And so they believe he took his curse on the road and created 3 other vampires. And those 3 vampires created the 13 original vampires that started the 13 clans. And they talk about the embrace, which is, of course, the vampire creates a new vampire by draining all the blood from their victim, then feeding the corpse some of their own blood, and they will arise then as a vampire themselves. And then they talk about the different ways of hunting that different vampires will choose, and they give you some ideas for source material, and they give you some tips about playing the game in the dark medieval world, a little bit of in-character exposition about the hunger for blood and how it feels, similarly with the action of hunting, and then the ecstatic act of feeding itself. And it's something that is just part of the personal horror aspect of the game. And then the denouement. So once you gorge yourself on blood, you feel the beast has been silenced. Your hunger is fallen off. You start to realize what exactly you've done as the drained victim lies in your lap. And you remember once again that you're doomed to do this forever. You will have to feed on mortal humans in order to survive. And it's not a great feeling. Here we got another atmospheric picture of, looks like a monk or a scholar of some sort. An extract from something called History of Ash and Bone. So now we get into A Place and Time, Chapter 1. So it's a little bit like a briefing for a new vampire. You're now one of the damned, as you're called at the time. So you're part of kindred society, whether you like it or not. And so what does that mean? What does it feel like to be in this state? What does it feel like to have this beast clawing at the back of your mind? Demands that you feed. Demands sometimes you fly into a rage to defend yourself or your territory. And they talk about the key social aspects of the setting as well. So basically they lay out the basic ways that vampires are distinguished. So you have social distinctions, including age, particularly generation, and the way these are referred to. So you have your fledglings who were freshly birthed. Then you had your neonates. So once your sires released you into kindred society, that's your kind of early stage of independence. After a degree of experience, maybe a century or two, you become an ancilla. You have more power and influence in your domain. The elders will still see you as, a tool to be used and sometimes disposed of as needed, but you command more respect. And then you have the elders who are generally in leadership positions, will have domains to call their own. Then you have Methuselahs who are, 1,000 years or more old, and their thinking has advanced to the point where they really don't think at all like mortals anymore. And there's very little you can do to stop a Methuselah from getting what they want. They're extremely powerful. And then you have the Antediluvians. So these are the almost mythical third generation of vampires that sired each of the clans. It's sort of unknown how many of them are still alive. It's assumed that they're in torpor, hidden away deep somewhere. Beliefs about their reality, how many are left, and what they'll do if they do arise vary. Now, something different about this setting is that rather than having this sort of Sabbat Camarilla distinction, we have high clans and low clans. So it kind of brings in this aspect of the rigid feudal class hierarchy that we had in mortal society at the time. When you're born into a clan, you're born into a family, and those clans have different positions in kindred society. So the high clan, they've got more of a voice. They've got more position in kindred society. They maybe even have influence in the church. Princess court, they will have rights that they get just by default, by being a member of a high clan. If you're in a low clan, it's different. So you have to earn your place, and earning respect can be difficult. Society is kind of calcified and ossified over many, many, many centuries. So, the high and the low clans take a very different approach to their part and their role in kindred society, and they're treated very differently depending on who they're dealing with. Then we have the roads as well. So the road is kind of a spiritual map that kindred follow to try and avoid giving into the beast and becoming just a creature of pure mayhem and destruction. There are different ways of doing that, which are called the roads. There are different roads that try to make peace with the beast. There are roads that try to indulge the beast. There are roads that indulge in sin and infernalism, all kinds of different stuff, and we'll see more about that later in the book as well. Then we have the traditions. So even way back when in 1242, we had a version of the Camarilla traditions, even though the Camarilla didn't exist as such. And the first tradition is the Covenant. This is about, where vampires come from and who's got the power from night to night. The blood of the betrayer flows through you, making you in his image. You are cursed, and it is only through obedience that you survive. You are the betrayer's kind and are bound by these, God's laws for you. There you go. And the second tradition is the domain. The herd and the land that they inhabit are the domain. If you can keep it, it is yours. If you can take it, it becomes yours. If you can do neither, you submit to those who can and call them elder. So much like the modern knights and their traditions, you have to respect the domain of others when you enter it. And if you have a domain, people should respect yours in turn, but your domain may not be permanent. Third tradition, we have our progeny. Creation of another vampire is not to be taken lightly. First, you should consult with your elders and your fellow clan members and receive their blessing. If you sire another vampire without that blessing, then that can be a big problem. And leading to that is the fourth tradition of the accounting. So what you create is yours and your blood. Their blood and their punishment are yours. Like we saw in the modern knights, if you sire a vampire and they're under your control, they're not yet a neonate and had their debut in kindred society, then whatever they do is your problem. If they cause a problem, then you are responsible. Then we have fifth tradition of destruction. So do not spill blood, for it is precious. All blood, no matter the source, must be used and useful. Blood in the soil is an unforgivable waste. Basically, this is about killing other vampires. It's wrong. You shouldn't do it. If you do it, then you can be torn apart, essentially. So you don't want to do that. What they've done here that's interesting, they have two translations of each tradition. So above that, we have what Cain supposedly said. So forbidden art thou to spill the blood of another of thy kind who is elder. This right belongs only to the closest to me and none other. It is forbidden for those of weaker blood to rise against their elders. This is my final covenant. Thus spoke Cain from the God Regent translations. Now note, this is more specific than the last traditions of Phoenicia, which are quoted below that. Cain supposedly said that the real crime is younger generations rising up against their elders. It's a little bit more specific about what you can and can't do in that translation. So there's a little bit of an interesting room for interpretation there. In terms of the sixth tradition, basically don't reveal yourselves to those who are not of the blood, and if you do so, then you renounce your claim to being a part of kindred society, and both translations basically amount to the same thing. So you don't want to reveal yourself. It's not known as the Masquerade at this time. As I said, I believe it was referred to as the Veil, but the idea is the same. Then they talk about how a typical city with the kindred underground would operate. So of course you have the prince. So this will be a vampire of considerable age and power who rules with as tight a fist as they can. The traditions say that the prince ought to be the eldest of all the vampires in the city and therefore the closest to Cain. Then you have the keeper. Their job is to keep and maintain the Elysia throughout the city. That's places of peace where vampires can gather and show our teeth to one another without biting. Designated areas where vampires of different clans can meet, negotiate, backstab each other, but it's supposed to be an area of peace, and the keeper is the one who keeps that peace. And then we have the chamberlain, who sits beside the prince. The chamberlain is kind of the one who gets down and dirty on behalf of the prince. So they help the princes to maintain their power base. They know who's who, they know who lives where, who has what territory, and they'll be in the thick of all the vampire politics and help the prince maintain their domain. Then you have the sheriff, responsible for keeping the law in the domain. They can sometimes outlive princes and end up rising in the ranks, but the sheriff is most likely going to have their own territory and private hunting grounds, even over the chamberlain, because they're so valuable to the prince. Then you've got your harpies, your scourges, and others. So there are other types of vampires. They all have their own jobs. So they give an example here of London's own rat catcher. London's domain has a rat catcher whose duty it is to herd rats, see to it that they're edible, and corral them into cisterns where London's unfortunate vampires can take their fill. So it's kind of like a charity outreach to those vampires who are less fortunate. Then you got your freelances and scourges, your muscle for hire types. And a good way of thinking about kindred society, in a sense, is as if you're at the lower ranks of a very, very old and very, very powerful organized crime organization. There's a strict hierarchy in place. You've got to follow your orders. The better that you do, you can eventually become more of a made man and people will leave you alone, but it takes a lot of work to get there. In the meantime, if you step a foot wrong, you'll have a sheriff breathing down your neck. It's a pretty ruthless world, and it's a good way to think about it. But just with that added frisson of deadliness, Tales of Damnation. So this is the different ideas of the vampire origins and the amaranth. So instead of diablerie, drinking the blood of a more senior vampire can thicken the blood and strengthen your beast. If you ever get found out, then you'll be destroyed. And then we have some discussion of the generations. So the second generation are the three children of Cain. Then the third generation, as I said, were the antediluvians, who were the founders of the 13 different clans. The fourth and fifth generations are known as the knights. So they're very strong. Typically, they're very much in the Methuselah category. The sixth and seventh generations are the elders. Note that in the rules given in this book, it's quite possible, I think, to buy yourself up to about 8th or 7th generation as a starting character. So you can be quite powerful in this game, which I enjoy. I think it makes sense that in the Dark Ages, where humans didn't have a surveillance state and smartphones and all the rest of it, that you would have an easier time maintaining power, and it would be kind of a golden age for vampires in a certain sense, so I enjoy that part. The 8th, 9th, and 10th generations, probably your sires if you're starting fresh. The 11th and 12th are the current generations at this time, so there's no 13th generation vampires yet. We do have, however, the rumors of thin bloods. Here in the medieval times, they don't bother counting generations after the 12th, as anything further removed can scarcely be called a vampire at all. Then they talk about, the different ways your story can end. One of them is the wassail, so that's when you entirely lose yourself to the beast, you become a raw force of destruction, and there's probably no return. The vampires around you will put you down. The alternative is Golconda, or so the story goes. And as we know, this is the idea that it's possible to sort of redeem yourself as a vampire and reach a kind of blessed state. You find a balance between animal and human, and you retain your dark powers, but the sun doesn't kill you anymore. You don't need blood anymore, and a stake through the heart won't paralyze you anymore. So whether it's possible to reach that state, we don't know. If people have reached that state, then they're not talking about it. There's a bit of talk about the enemies and mysteries of the time. So of course we have the hunters, which were the inquisitors basically in the Dark Ages vampire line. We've got the werewolves or the lupines. We've got the witches, i.e. the mages. Shining ones, so they are opposites in every way. They are things that lurk in the brambles and the thorns, so that's your hint that we're talking about changelings. And then we have the ghosts or the wraiths. They're no simple puzzles to unfold and destroy, no matter what our Roman cousins might tell us. And of course, there are deeper mysteries still. So there's a lot of here that'll be a lot of the background here that'll be familiar to you if you're coming from Vampire the Masquerade, but there are some differences. We've got the amaranth, not diablerie. There's a little bit different approach to vampiric life. You start at minimum 12th generation, and it's easy to go up from there at character creation. There's a quite different structure of vampiric society at the time with these high and low clans, and no Camarilla Sabbat kind of division. And once again, we have a 2-page spread with a bit of in-character story and a atmospheric bit of artwork. Then we get into the clans. We go back into the high and low clans again. So Cainite society thrives on power differentials, and here we have the high and the low clans. They do note that this varies depending on where you are. So the Venture and La Sombra are typically high clans everywhere you go, and usually Nosferatu are low clans, but that can change, depending on who's in power in the region that you happen to be in. When a clan stands as a wide majority in a given region, they're given high clan status, basically. And in certain cities, high clans derive their placement from some sort of mythological divine right. So they interpret the Book of Nod or something else as a way to justify their rule. Members of low clans are expected to defer to those of high clan lineage, and traveling Cainites will quickly learn to uncover these local traditions immediately upon or before entering any new region. Lastly, any bloodline not openly boasting genesis in a high clan is considered a low clan or lower, depending on location. Exceptions to this rule dwindle by the night, which bodes ill for the waning salubri. Then we get into clans. So once again, we have the Assamites. So they trace their roots back to the lands known as Persia. They're known as the children of Hakim or the Saracens, closely identified with the Middle Eastern origins here. They tend to choose easily defended dwellings that mortals find difficult to expose. They prefer a mix of social and mental attributes and abilities, and they tend to have a dot in mentor because their sire-child relationship tends to be close, and 1 or 2 dots in generation because they tend to diablerize those who aren't good enough to be good assassins. So that can actually be really beneficial. Clan disciplines are Auspex, Presence, and Quietus. Then we have, of course, their stereotypes of the other clans as well. Then we've got the Bruja. I would say in general, the Character portraits of the clans in Dark Ages 20 are pretty cool compared to the clan portraits in V20. They've got a little bit more vibe. They give you a feeling of the period and the time and place. So I very much enjoy that. They also have the heraldry here, which again gives it the medieval vibe. So the Bruja, they're known as the Zealots, the Philosopher Kings, or the Rabble. It's a derogatory term. So again, they're a little bit rebellious. They tend to seek out the highest concentration of people they can. So cities and major villages, establish communal havens, and go hunting together and so forth. They are fierce warriors, so they favor physical attributes, or the leaders will have good social attributes. And the majority of Bruja have at least some martial abilities. And their clan disciplines are celerity, potence, and presence. So that would be speed, strength, and charisma, if you like. A supernatural level of charisma. Then we have their stereotypes about some more of the other clans. Now we have the Cappadocians. So these are the predecessors to the Giovanni that we see in the modern knights. So they're the practitioners of necromancy. They're a cosmopolitan clan and can be found from the Holy Land to the monasteries of Ireland. They tend to dress conservatively, as you can see here, as many necromancers were members of religious orders in life. They tend to dress to conceal or obscure their features, using veils or hooded cloaks. Some theatrical members of the clan may dress in funerary masks or burial shrouds, like that detail. So they tend to feed from targets of opportunity and from practical and secure havens. They're more scholarly and they want to pursue the mystic arts of necromancy rather than expose themselves easily to humans. So that's their priority, is get feeding done practically and pragmatically and not spend a lot of time on the hunt. People that they choose to embrace, typically in the Cappadocians, would be mystics, poets, and dervishes, as well as scholars, magicians, and surgeons. They tend to be selective. They look for an inquisitive mind and insight. They also tend to follow the road of heaven, viewing their religiosity and morality as a way to achieve knowledge of God and thus triumph over death. Others take a more detached approach and follow the road of bones, which we'll hear more about later. Their clan disciplines are auspex, fortitude, and of course necromancy. Their weakness is that all Cappadocians appear ashy and corpse-like, and they can't spend vitae to give the appearance of life or the breath of life as other vampires can. This means that a Cappadocian gets a +2 difficulty on any social roles that would be hindered by a corpse-like appearance. By the way, did I talk about the weaknesses of the other clans? I did not. So the Assamite weakness, they are rigorous to a fault, so each character has an obsession with her highest intellectual or creative ability, which acts as a derangement. When it's active, the character's aura glows in a way as to provide hints to the vizier's true nature, as well as the object of her obsession visible to auspex users. Additionally, Assamites darken with age. It's a slow process, but over the centuries, their skin blackens to a matte onyx color, which is quite interesting. The Bruja weakness is a passion that can send them into fits of rage if left unchecked, so the difficulties of rolls to resist or guide frenzy are too higher than normal, and they may never spend willpower to avoid frenzy. However, they may spend a point of willpower to end a frenzy that has already begun. So, again, similar to what we see in the modern knights. So yeah, by the way, the Cappadocians get their own clan book for Dark Ages Vampire, so do look into that if you want to know more about the history of the Cappadocians and the olden days necromancers. Then we got the Gangrels. They're known as the Outlaws or the Wolf's Heads. They tend to be into the hunt. They sleep wherever they damn well want to. Their havens will tend to be somewhere on the outskirts or outside of civilizations, lone hunting shacks, outlaw camps, fur trader posts, etc. Sometimes they move as nomadic groups as well. So they have a certain reputation for being loners, but they do enjoy human contact and kindred contact as well to a certain degree. But they do have a more animalistic bent. They embrace a little bit more of the beast and the vibe of hunting. And of course, with that in mind, they tend to favor physical attributes first. They tend to favor talents, instinct-driven abilities, with skills as a secondary. Their clan disciplines are animalism, naturally, fortitude, and protean, which allows them to adjust their body shape. Their weakness, however, is that when a gangrel frenzies, their beast rises to the surface, and the wildness in her blood finds purchase in her flesh and in her mind. And you can develop a small physical or mental animal trait that suits either local vampire mythology or a predatory or scavenging animal in the region. So the trait should give them a +1 difficulty penalty and 1 automatic failure on some relevant dice pool. And that trait and penalty remain until the player accepts an automatic failure. Again, similar to what we found in V20, but with a little bit, some slight differences if you look closely. Then we got the La Sombra. So they are leaders and prophets, kings and caliphs, generals and holy men. They're scrupulous in deciding who's worthy of the embrace, and ruthless in destroying those of the clan who prove unworthy. They're known as the Magisters. Membership is diverse, so they're evenly split from Spanish, Italian, Jewish, North African, or Arabian origin. They dress in the finest clothes they can find, precious silks, rich French brocades, or the lush woven fabrics of Arabia. They're born to wealth and power, and they choose to remain typically in their family holdings, and that gives them plenty of opportunities centuries to feed because they have lots of family around, servants and retainers, etc. As far as the embrace, they tend to choose their childer from amongst the wealthy, powerful, politically elite. Disciplines are dominate, obtenebration, which as we know is the manipulation of shadows, and potence, which is the increasing of your strength. Their weakness is the same as the modern knights, so they can't be seen in any sort of reflective surface, so it's more difficult to conceal their supernatural nature from mortals, and also they can't abide the presence of bright light. They take one more level of aggravated damage from any exposure to sunlight whatsoever. And then we have their stereotypes as well. Now we have the Malkavians. Again, I think really nice piece of artwork here with the bloody claws. So the Malkavians are known as the Cassandras, the Children of Malkav, or the Seers. Sometimes they tend to look the part of madness, but they learn quickly to blend in with their surroundings. They tend to haven in places that look normal, given the context that they were sired in or that they've been around in. They'll do anything to blend in and not stand out. In other words, most won't have a lavish home and make themselves obvious. They tend to embrace in accordance with their needs, and they judge each individual on their own merits. So that gives them actually a great strength in the clan, is that they have a lack of predictability, and they look for diversity of opinions and approaches in their clan. They tend to favor mental attributes and knowledges. The less stable favor talents, and many will have allies in case they need to avoid persecution. Their clan disciplines are auspex, dementation, which is inflicting derangements on others, and obfuscate, which is the ability to hide in the shadows. Their weakness is that they have a derangement, which you can choose from page 352, which can never be cured, but you can pay willpower to ignore it for a turn at a time. Even powerful gifts of the blood, such as Valyrian, may only push it aside for a night, but it will always come back in full force. And if you use willpower in that way, then you cannot use it again for a full week thereafter. Yeah, you really have to face your demons as a Malkavian. Now we have the Nosferatu. Again, really great atmospheric and scary picture there. I love this heraldry here as well. We've got locks and spooky helmets and the dragons holding a key. It's all kinds of stuff going on here. So the Nosferatu, of course, are one of the low clans. They're known as the Priors. Some believe that they hold the worst of the Curse of Cain, or they're evil incarnate themselves, or corrupt in some way. They're horrific, visually speaking. So they tend to seek havens in forgotten corners and sewers or necropolises, stuff like that. First taste of their sire's foul blood imparts not only immortality, but the blood's terrible secret. The change is not instant, but rather over a period of days or even weeks. The body is racked with the blood's burden. Muscle, skin, and gristle grind, break, and reform in a horrific mockery of humanity. They need to be smart in order to survive, but also they should be able to defend themselves if somebody is chasing them down, which is often happening. Their clan disciplines are animalism, obfuscate, so hiding in the shadows, which is particularly useful for them, and potence, which allows them to spend vitae to increase their strength. So they start with 0 dots in appearance and can never raise it. They automatically fail any first impression roll except for intimidation, and have difficulty with virtually any social interaction. So the Nosferatu, as in other settings, they are lurking in the shadows and great keepers of secrets. Then we got the Ravnos. Fantastic picture here, very stately. So the Ravnos are viewed as deceivers and tricksters. Their origin is not super well known. They're known as the Shapers, the Charlatans, the Seekers, the Vagabonds, or the Unwelcome. They tend to wear traveling clothes of all different varieties, while there's some who proudly proclaim what they believe to be their Indian roots. More modern Ravnos in this period have eschewed that and tend to prefer European styles of clothing. Their havens may be traveling caravans, roadside inns for a few nights at a time. They tend to find out-of-the-way places to stay for short periods at a time rather than havening in one single place. At character creation, since they rely on trickery and social acumen, they tend to prioritize social attributes. Younger charlatans tend to be embraced from traveling professions, and older ones are often workers, warriors, priests, or gentry. They will often have points in allies, contacts, mentors, and resources. Older Ravnos favor the road of kings, while the younger prefer the road of sin, and many also follow the road of humanity, irrespective of their age. Their clan disciplines are animalism, like the Nosferatu, a chimistry, which is once again the ability to create and maintain illusions, and fortitude, which is spending vitae for additional defense against attack. All Ravnos have a key personality trait chosen in character creation, which they are incapable of resisting if the opportunity to express it presents itself. So it could be some kind of virtuous act, like defending the weak, or something sinister, like taking advantage of someone in a lesser position. Then we got the Setites. They're known as the Serpents, or the followers of Set to other clans, and of course they're mostly Egyptian or Northern African in origin, but they try to avoid looking overtly North African when they travel in less tolerant regions. So their havens, they tend to establish centers of worship to Set in abandoned temples. They try not to draw attention from those in power as one of the low clans, so they will tend to feed quietly on those down on their luck in the mortal society. They tend to recruit from within the ranks of the secret Set cults that they themselves establish, so that's handy. Their clan disciplines, we have have Obfuscate, hiding in the shadows, Presence, which can inspire awe or terror in those around you, and their unique clan discipline of Serpentis, which we saw in the Modern Knights, allows them to adopt some reptilian qualities. Their weakness is that they carry the Curse of Horus more heavily than other vampires, and take twice the amount of aggravated damage from any exposure to sunlight than members of other clans. So they're really, really sensitive to sunlight. Then we have our old fancy friends, the Toreadors. They live by their whims. They are known as the aesthetes, the artisans, and the vanitas. So they pursue beauty and propagate themselves through beauty. And they love to be surrounded in their havens by art and beautiful things, as well as artists, or have a patron of their own that can help them fulfill their expensive tastes. They tend to choose their childhood by passion and conviction. At character creation, they focus on high social attributes and abilities, and they tend to spend points in background like herd, retainers, and resources. They don't like to sever themselves from the pleasures of the mortal world, and likewise, for that reason, they tend to follow the road of humanity. However, some choose the road of kings, and their clan disciplines, they have Auspex, Celerity, which is the supernatural speed, and Presence, of course. Then we have the Tremere, the sorcerers of the blood. They're few in number and they don't have a lot of allies. They are known as the usurpers or the Tremores, the trembling ones. They tend to wear simple and practical attire. They will haven mostly in cities, particularly those universities or cathedral schools, as they are scholars themselves. They tend to fill their ranks with individuals who hunger for knowledge and power, occultists, alchemists, theologians, philosophers, scholars of all kinds. And so they're pragmatic in who they choose to embrace. At character creation, most Tremere tend to follow the road of humanity. They favor mental attributes and knowledges, because that's their main thing. For those who practice thaumaturgy, a high willpower is a must, and a mentor is a very common background to have as well, because having a teacher to help you learn the ways of the clan is very useful. Their weakness, however, is that they're particularly vulnerable to blood bonds. So the first draft of blood that a Tremere consumes counts as 2 for the purposes of establishing a bond, meaning that the next drink will complete it. Furthermore, all newly embraced Tremere must surrender a vial of their blood to the Council of Seven, who stored in a hidden vault in their Carpathian chantry. That blood, they warn, can be the means by which they exact thaumaturgical punishments on any who disobey. So, yeah, being a Tremere, serious business. Then we got the Zimichi. These are, once again, the kind of creepy weirdos we've come to expect from the Modern Knights. They come from the wilds of Eastern Europe. They are known as the Fiends, and in the past they were amongst the more regal of clans. As war crept into their lands, they find themselves forced to compromise their preferred forms, and so they found liberation through body modification, and thus they began to change into the Zimichi we know today. They do tend to keep their haven in whatever constitutes luxury for them, so they do still have a certain regal aesthetic. Traditionally, they would embrace people from suitable members of their own nobility, and they rarely embrace foreigners who have to be truly exceptional. At character creation, they prize equally mental and physical attributes. While the image of the Zimichi warrior cutting a gory path through the battlefield is common, an accurate stereotype, the clan also boasts its share of scholars, priests, monks, and sorcerers. Domain is the most important background because they've been working so hard to keep that domain. They also like to have herd. They tend to follow either the road of kings or the road of metamorphosis. Then we have the clan disciplines, of course, are animalism, auspex, and vicissitude, which as we know is the art of flesh and bone shaping, which is super gross, but very, very cool. Their weakness is that they have to rest with at least 2 handfuls of native soil, usually their home or wherever their grave was, and for each day of rest without it, they have all their dice pools rounding down cumulatively until the pool reaches 1 die. A full day of proper rest with the native soil will restore dice pools to their normal value. Then we have the Ventru. So leading is their gift and their burden. They chafe at somber restrictions, ever hungry and ambitious. They always want more power. So they're known as the powermongers, ambitiones, or patricians. They're not seen in ostentatious clothes, but they will be cut exceptionally fine and tailored exceptionally well. You'll see costly embroidery or exceptional cut. They dislike being in the middle of nowhere, so they like to haven towards a good stronghold with vast lands. They have a certain sense of self-superiority, which is quite off-putting. They never reproduce haphazardly, but select prospects like fine wine. At character creation, they need a keen balance between social and mental attributes, between social graces and knowledge. A Ventru with low charisma is like a fish without water. The Road of Kings calls them in their deepest desires, for each Ventru believes his birthright is to lead. Their clan disciplines, therefore, are dominate, which is very useful, because it allows you to mind control folks for a period of time. Fortitude, to defend themselves, and presence, lessons to inspire awe or terror with their mere appearance. However, they do have a weakness in their rarefied tastes, so they're restricted to one particular type of mortal, like merchants or Catholics or whatever, in order to fill their blood pool. So if you are a Ventru, the main cost of that is you're selective in your feeding, so you need to find a particular kind of blood to sate your beast. Now we've got the bloodline. So the clans of Cain are not the entirety of the vampiric edition. There are numerous other bloodlines that permeate Africa, Europe, and Asia during this period. Some have questionable origins, some come from particular areas, some believe they have an alternate origin from other kinds of vampires. They mention as well the two other types of vampires that have made inroads during the dark medieval world. They don't get much attention in this book because they haven't made it to Europe just yet, but there's the Asian breeds, and the others are those who call themselves Libon, who are very similar physically to Cainites. They have vitae, they have childer that are of thinner blood than their sires. However, they eschew the Cain mythology, and their origin comes from Africa, and each line of the Libon has their own creation myth. However, most European vampires believe Set was one of Cain's third generation, so the followers of Set are still considered a clan of mainstream Cainite society for that reason. The bloodlines featured in this chapter have unique disciplines or unique thaumaturgy or necromancy paths. This can mean that vampire is particularly useful, as that discipline will not be widely available to anybody else. You kind of want to keep that to yourself to ensure your survival, because usefulness means you're more likely to be kept around by those who rule whatever region you're working in at the moment. So for bloodlines, we've got the Aramanes. You may remember these from the Modern Knights as well. So this is a lineage produced along the coast of Scotland, Scandinavia, and Ireland, to a lesser extent England and Normandy. So they're a Northern European stock. They're known as the Valkyries or the Sisters amongst each other. They tend to embrace warriors, and they tend to be tall and well-muscled. Their existence is usually nomadic, and they learn to make daytime shelters inside fallen trees or small caverns, and they don't generally thrive in cities. Their bloodline consists only of women. Their disciplines are animalism, potence, and spiritus, which one of the unique disciplines mentioned earlier. Note that the bloodlines in this book are not in the appendix, but they're right after the clans, unlike V20's core book, which I think is a much better choice. So we're already seeing the improvement in layout in this book. Their weakness is that their blood resists the ties of bondage, so she can create neither blood bonds nor ghouls, which is unfortunate. Both those things are pretty useful. And then we have the Anda. These are drawn from almost entirely Mongol stock. They're known as the Tartars by others. Tend to travel with the Mongol army and thus don't have traditional havens. Skilled horsemen or women. And at character creation, they seldom possess different natures and demeanors. Their individual attitudes are straightforward, and they prize physical attributes above all, and skills for the focus on archery and ride, which are particularly strong amongst the Mongolian army. The bloodline disciplines are animalism, fortitude, and protein, so they don't have a unique discipline, but they do have a unique approach, perhaps, to vampiric existence, given their background. Their weakness is that they suffer from a kind of loneliness from being cut off from the majority of their people. For 1 hour before sunset and for the last hour before sunrise, their dice pools are limited by their road rating, as if they were acting during the day. Bear that in mind when you're planning your activities. Then we have the Bali. Basically, they're known as the devils. They're reviled by everybody, so they really need to try and blend in with their mortal fashions around them. They tend to love abandoned places of worship. They will desecrate former altars with blasphemous rituals, and they gather cults of personalities around themselves. Their social attributes are primary with mental secondary, so they are social creatures first and foremost, and they rely on stealth a great deal, and they also have a high knowledge of academics and the occult. Most follow the path of screams on the road of sin, but a few walk the road of kings. Their clan disciplines, like in the Modern Knights, are a daimonian, presence, and obfuscate. So daimonian is an infernal discipline, which is why they have the nickname of the devils. Their weakness is that the torment in the blood of Cain recoils from religious symbols, and the Bali are particularly vulnerable. Unless those religious symbols have lain abandoned for half a century, any individual brandishing a religious symbol at a devil is considered to have a true faith rating, one higher than their actual rating. So they really need to avoid religious people of any stripe. At the Bonsam, they're known as the Unseen or the Stalkers. They are, as you can see, quite bat-like in appearance. They've spread inland from the Ivory Coast across the African continent. They are hunters or warriors during their lives, and usually lean and well-muscled. His lineage has mastered an art of shape-shifting, and a Bonsam may exhibit some animal features. They prefer to carve out a habitat far from other vampires, but it might include some mortal villages, and they might have learned to meld into the natural terrain so they can sleep anywhere from the forest floor to the canopy. They can also make do with digging underground tunnels or crafting cocoon-like nests that block the sunlight. They prefer to embrace skilled hunters and sometimes warriors. A talent for stalking and killing is very important. Bonsam is usually embraced and abandoned. And they have a unique discipline called Abombwe, and as well as Obfuscate and Potence. Their weakness is that they inspire primordial terror in mortals. Mortals who fail at a courage roll difficulty 7 when seeing a bonsam in their true form either flee in terror or gather up weapons to kill the monster, depending on the size of the mortal group and the nature of its leader. The fear can be overcome, however, and a mortal who has succeeded at this check need not roll again upon meeting the same bonsam. So, an interesting one. And we don't yet know what a Abombwe is, because that wasn't in the V5. Here we have Children of Osiris, connection to the Egyptian world here, clear in their heraldry and the imagery that we see here. This is another Egyptian bloodline, unlike the followers of Set. They are the followers of Osiris, who was an Egyptian pharaoh, and they paint him in a very positive light, but in reality he could scheme and make depraved deals with the best of them. They're known as the penitents or the pharaohs. People are mocking them. They are as varied in appearance as they come, but at some point after they're initiated, they always shave their heads to symbolize that they are like a babe on a new path. They're hunted by the followers of Set because their beliefs are in opposition, and sometimes shunned by the Canaanites. So a child of Osiris usually finds it best to stay with others of their kind. They tend to hide in well-hidden communal temples, far away from other havens. Careful in selecting their prey, opting for large men who could be fed from without killing them. A child of Osiris cannot embrace, and they cannot actively recruit from other clans. Their clan disciplines are Bardo, +2 from their original clan. They'll have their original clan's weakness, and then they'll have an initiation rite to render a new applicant's blood inert, and they're no longer able to embrace. That's your Children of Osiris. Then we got the Danava, bloodline hailing from India. They believe that the drinking of blood imbues them with prana, which in turn fuels the thaumaturgy they wield that has existed for far longer than the sorceries of the Tremere. They're known as the Children of Danu. Their appearance is unmistakably regal. They're all permeated with the sweet smell of holy attars, perfumes that hang in the air and infuse their clothing long after it is removed. Steeped in the blood of India, their style of dress varies like any who can claim ancestry from within its borders. It would be easy to mistake their havens for temples. Gods adorned in fresh flowers covered the altars, and the air is thick with the scent of incense, offerings, and attar oils alike. At character creation, they all have a lordly bearing about them, and so they rely on social acumen and extensive knowledge gleaned from the Vedas. The allies, retainers, and resources backgrounds would serve them well, as well as the Road of Kings or the Road of Heaven, which are equally divided amongst the Danava. Their clan disciplines are Dominate, Fortitude, and Thaumaturgy. A pretty cool clan. I like them. Or bloodline, rather. Then we got the Gargoyles, created by the Tremere in 1121, and they were used to serve as foot soldiers in the war against the Zamichi. They were magically spawned from the bodies of captured Zamichi, Nosferatu, and Gangrel. The first ones were fairly mindless and had short lives, but by 1242, the Gargoyle bloodline has gained independence, and the Tremere is starting to lose control. The rebellious Gargoyles are throwing off their chains, which is very cool. They're not well integrated into Canaanite society, but some have found a place for themselves. They're known as the Grotesques, and their flesh comes in a variety of hues, but as they age, their skin grows thicker and harder, much like stone, and many sport a tremendous pair of bat-like wings, which gives them the flight ability. Most gargoyles dwell amid the chantries of Clan Tremere, but free gargoyles may live in mountain caves, forgotten catacombs, or any other wild or hidden place that protects them from the sun. They prefer to feed on lonely travelers along mountain passes or forested trails, tend not to just kill mortals for food, but because they are limited in numbers, they tend to breed every chance they get, so they will embrace anyone and everyone. Character creation. Their physical attributes are key, as are their talents. Servitor gargoyles must possess a mentor, usually from Tremere. Free gargoyles will have a haven and herd background to help them along. Many gargoyles, in turn, walk the road of the beast. Some are working with their Tremere masters to develop a road of service, and some walk the road of heaven as they seek to make sense of the life they've been given. Their bloodline disciplines are flight, fortitude, and potence, so they're tough, strong, and they can fly, which is pretty awesome. And we have the Giovanni. No other clan out there has any idea where they come from. They're known as the Young Ones, or the Giovanotti, the youngsters. They're few and varied in appearance, albeit unified by the ashen quality that marks their Cappadocian blood. So at character creation, the Young Ones, as they're known, value exceptional insight and strong resolve, so mental attributes and skills are usually primary, but they also value knowledges. Most members follow the road of humanity, and they will often take points in retainers, resources, herds, and allies. Generation is usually quite low, never going above 11th. Clan disciplines, there you have Auspex, Fortitude, and Necromancy, just like the Cappadocians. And like other members of the Cappadocian clan, they have an ashen quality of their skin, which makes other humans eerily aware of their otherness. Their kiss is excruciatingly painful. So that's the Giovanni. And we know that weakness becomes much more prominent later in their existence. Now we have the Impundulu, known as the Witchkin or the Familiars if people are being derogatory. So they are powerful necromancers in life, married to an equally powerful life witch named Bomkazi. This was the original Impundulu. One day he summoned a spirit that was too strong and was killed. Bomkazi mourned her husband and buried him, but Impundulu rose the next night, for the spirit had left some of its power in him. So basically they have a different origin story for how these vampires came to be. They claim the Southeast African Cape as their domain. The area is poor and sparsely populated. They prefer this relative isolation. They tend to live with one or more Bomkazi witches in their residence of choice. Bomkazi use their life magic to heal, requiring only a small herd, just one for every Impundulu. As an Impundulu can only feed from the Bomkazi, and the witches are both unbondable and powerful, this is a purely voluntary relationship. Very, very different dynamic from a typical mortal and vampiric relationship. Their clan disciplines include necromancy, primarily cenotaph and haunting path, fortitude, and presence. Their weakness is that they only gain sustenance from the blood of the Bomkazi. The witches are independently powerful. The Impundulu will do well to treat any Bomkazi as an equal ally as opposed to a retainer, with all the complications that might entail. So that's a very interesting dynamic. Definitely a cool bloodline to play. Then we have the Kiasid, individually cursed vampires drawn together. When a Cainite tries to embrace a fey-touched human, either by accident or on purpose, the clash of opposing natures usually kills the poor creature. In the rare event that it doesn't, the Vitae burns away any powers and fey-related memories the new fledgling might have had and turns her into a Kiasid. They feel instinctively they don't belong amongst the Cainites, but they don't know quite why. Their blood is not inert, but so they can embrace and continue the bloodline. Their embraces, however, are painful and tragic, causes a period of physical and emotional anguish that can last for weeks. As for their havens, they tend to be outcasts. They choose abandoned buildings, trying to keep their location a secret. Clan disciplines are Mythoceria, Fey side of their blood coming through, and then 2 from whatever their original clan would have been by whoever embraced them. Their weakness is that due to their mark of the Fey, the difficulty of rolls to recognize the Kiasid as otherworldly decreased by 1. Additionally, their Fey heritage makes them vulnerable to cold iron. Weapons made from cold iron inflict aggravated damage, and such damage triggers an immediate roll to avoid either frenzy or Rotschreck as befitting her nature. Must be quite a difficult existence. Then we have the Lamii. So the place of the Lamii among the Cainites is complex. They don't seek out mortal power or influence, nor do they care for petty rivalries or factionalism of the jihad. They prize learning and knowledge, specifically of the occult. They make them well matched with their Cappadocian clanmates. It's not uncommon for them to live as an itinerant scholar or duelist, traveling between domains and only returning home to impart the wisdom earned on her travels to her flock. They don't possess the pallor of other Cappadocians, generally descended from the peoples of Egypt and the Holy Land, but there's a lot of diversity in that region, so a lot of different types of people. And when not in a ritual space, they tend to dress in armor or practical clothing, take their havens in remote areas that mortals don't like to visit, like crypts, graveyards, shrines, and abandoned plague villages. Character creation, they tend to be trained in combat, so survival, martial prowess, and stamina are highly valued. Knowledges, particularly the occult, are similarly valued. Seldom have backgrounds that relate to status in Cainite society. Currently fashionable among Cainites for a prince to keep a Lamia as an enforcer. They're known as the Gorgons or the Lilin, and their clan disciplines are fortitude, necromancy, and potence, and they developed their own branch of necromancy, the Path of the Twilight Garden, which they guard carefully and only teach to those who have come to venerate the Dark Mother. How cool is that? The weakness is that they are not touched by death in the way that Cappadocians are. Instead, they are blessed by that great and terrible mother that lies beyond death. Her merciless and terrible love brings ruin to those who are weak enough not to withstand it. So the bite of the Lamii brings the seed of Lilith, wasting plague that rots away the members of a still living body until eventually killing mortal victims. Any Cainite that consumes Lamia blood will also be carriers of the disease until all Lamia blood is purged from their bodies. How cool is that? So there's disease carriers. It's their weakness. Then we have the Lianin, so as we know from before, originating from the Celtic regions, they claim to have an origin from an ancient being they call the Crone, tend to lead solitary unlives in extremely rural areas. Everyone who sees them immediately recognizes that they're not humans. They look the part of a wild mystic, donned in blood and gore-stained fur cloaks covering leather and wool gowns dyed a stark white, green, or brown. Their flesh is adorned with strange glyphs and woads that hint at the sorcerous practice of Ogum. They wear the skulls of animals as masks, and often torques of finely woven precious metals can be found around their necks. They tend to choose the biggest cave, the darkest valleys, or the most sacred spots of their claimed territories as their havens. Burrowing into the dirt itself is also a common option. And their disciplines are animalism, which makes sense, presence, and Ogum, which, as we know, is related to their power over the ancestral woods. They focus on traits necessary to live in the wild at character creation, so they love having wits and stamina and animal ken. They rarely have the generation background at higher levels, and they tend to build cultish herds out in the wilds, and often maintain their sires as mentors. Every Lianin, from the moment of their embrace, feels the shard of spirit within her. When a Lianin embraces, her generation raises by 1 at the conclusion of the embrace. So if a Lianin embraces a child, child, her blood becomes 10th generation. The newly embraced child also carries 10th generation blood. A very significant downside. If you want to reproduce, then you're going to go down a generation. Then we have the Nagaraja, related to the Cappadocians. So it's a splinter faction of reincarnating Himalayan will workers, and with the help of an ancient Egyptian necromancer, they mastered necrotic magics, remaking themselves into fierce warriors and immensely powerful undead sorcerers. They're known as the Flesh Eaters, and they're the undisputed masters of necromancy in the lands east of the Indus, using this unique advantage to bargain with other clans. They tend to come from all walks of life, being mortal mages reborn as a bloodline. They have rows of pointed, irregular teeth. Besides the bastion of Enoch deep within the underworld, they prefer to travel, sticking close to the refuge yards of butchers, charnel grounds, and the dispossessed who won't be missed. They were ascetic in their mortal lives and remain so in their unlives. They're natives of the Himalayas, but their cult has taken to embracing candidates from all over the world, especially Egypt and the Levant. At character generation, they prize high willpower and mental attributes as primary. Physical attributes are secondary. Medicine and occult are ubiquitous, and melee is common. The extant beliefs of their cult tie easily into corrupted form, the path of Devaraja. A small number have even converted to the path of paradox. They commonly treat the vitreous path of necromancy, which they created, as primary, learning the ash path as secondary. And so their clan disciplines are auspex, dominate, and necromancy. The flesh eaters must consume fresh, raw meat to maintain their strength, marking them as untouchable and precluding sustenance without murder. This must come from living humans or fresh corpses. They suffer from the ragged bite and flesh-eater flaws with no recompense. Their teeth come in sharp rows and can't be retracted, but inflict +2 dice of damage in combat when biting. A lot of interesting character traits for the Nagaraja in this time period. And we have the Niktuku. So it's possible that these are not a child clan of the Nosferatu, but an offshoot that should never have been. They're the witches of Baba Yaga, and they hang on weakly alongside the Nosferatu, the clan they could have been instead. They hunt, they kill, they eat other vampires. They are at their most dedicated and cruel when on the hunt for a prior. They are all by design or because of the Amaranth, of relatively lower generation, even the youngest, and they're known as the Hungry for that reason. They tend to select the most beautiful youth they can find to embrace, just at the cusp of adulthood. They possess a great eeriness, although few see them long enough to put a finger on why. They're wide-eyed, their skin too perfect, their teeth too white, their fingers too long and graceful. Both their hunger and their beauty are inhuman. They prefer havens where they can't see the moon when they rise and leave each night. Their prey is vampires, pure and simple. The Hungry get so little sustenance from the blood of kine that they must feed on vampires. Little is known what happens at the embrace for these, though surely they must be starving for vampire blood at the moment they're turned. That hunger could lead to violence, so it is likely that all Hungry undergo the blood oath before the embrace or as part of the process. So at character creation, sires favor beauty above all else with a focus on youth and high appearance scores. Just before and after embrace, rigorous training starts to prepare the young assassins to hunt, meaning the talents and skills quickly eclipse any knowledge they may have had beforehand. Clan disciplines, useful for hunting, include auspex, celerity, and potence. Their weakness is that they cannot gain sustenance from kine or mortal blood. For every 3 blood points they drain, they gain only 1 to their system. Cainite vitae nourishes them normally. For every 100 years since their embrace, the Hungry lose a point from their appearance attribute. The dot doesn't vanish, instead it moves to any one physical attribute that can bear the increase. They grow slowly but decidedly bent, twisted, and deadly, slowly aging grotesques that blame the Nosferatu for their condition. Again, very, very cool. Some of the bloodlines in this game are really interesting. We got the Ramanga. Again, we have a different origin story here, which I won't go into. Part of the Libon tradition of not buying into the Cainite story of beginnings. So they're known as the puppeteers or the leeches. People are being nasty about it. The oldest of them hail from the Vazimba people and traders from Muslim and Arabian cultures. Younger Libon come from all over the African continent and the Middle East, typically well-dressed and well-groomed, and they're docile amongst outsiders, but stands proud amongst their own kind. They maintain one haven where rulers know to seek her out during the night, and one is a secluded spot where she spends her day in safety. As part of her services, Ramanga drinks the blood of the elite to draw out any curses cast on them, so there's rarely a need for her to hunt. Their clan disciplines are obtenebration, brackets Izina, so a variation of the shadow controlling power, obfuscate, which allows them to hide in the shadows, and presence. Their weakness, however, is that their use of presence and Izina when impacting others is at +1 difficulty. However, if she has a physical piece of the victim, this penalty is negated. So I guess you need a bit of hair or something like that. Then we have the Salubri Healer caste. So they are known as the Unicorns, the Shepherds, or the Soul Eaters. People are being derogatory. 3 castes of the Salubri. We have the Healer, Warrior, and Watcher. And the Healers seek to keep humanity hale and vital. So they rely on the grace of human communities to host them. They have a talent for finding the layers of the dispossessed. And they tend to be hosted by monasteries, convents, and heretical cults, particularly the Cathars. They value empathy and willpower, and they prioritize mental attributes along with social. They all tend to follow the various roads of heaven and humanity. Their predilection for spreading teeming masses of humanity grants them contacts attacks, while their ancient association with powerful canines cultivates allies. The clandespins are Auspex, Presence, and Valeran, which we have seen in V20 as well. Their weakness is that a Salubri learns only one dot of Valeran. He manifests the discipline's signature third eye. Salubri healers must succeed on a willpower roll, difficulty 6, if they attempt to feed on the unwilling. If they fail, they must find a willing vessel or suffer a 2-die penalty on all rolls for the remainder of the night. Victims enthralled by Presence do count as willing vessels, so keep that in mind. And Presence is a clan discipline. Then we have the Warrior Caste. Look at these badasses here, very knightly. You can see the third eye manifesting there. They're known as the Cyclopes, the Kinslayers, or the Soul Leaders. Once again, no warrior is granted the embrace without having first seen battle. Without exception, Salubri warriors are ready for war. Their havens are the battlefield with sword in hand, the saddle, the training yard. These are their homes, and they have a tendency towards wanderlust, so they like mobile havens and traveling caravans. At character creation, they're invariably focused on physical attributes, including strength and stamina. Swordsmanship is very much prized, as well as combat ability. Multiple languages are strikingly common. Retainers as squires and fighting men, and having higher resources isn't uncommon. They walk the path of chivalry or the road of vengeance, following their code. But some have turned to the path of the devil, raging against the system that has doomed them. Their clandestines are Auspex, Fortitude, and Valeran. They're capable of enduring terrific amounts of punishment, and those who have spent time as Gould squires often have a knowledge of potence as well. Once again, they have the same weakness as the Healer caste. Then we have the Watcher caste, finally, for the Salubri. There's not enough known about them for them to actually have a nickname to be passed around, because they are the Watchers in the Dark. They're a splinter of an already small clan and are all but unknown to their cousin castes, standing sentinel against the monsters who encroach upon Kane's midnight hegemony. They blend with the other castes and tend to strike a balance between the two styles, scholarly yet martial. They prefer tombs and monasteries to haven in. At character creation, have social attributes primary, with physical or mental being secondary, depending on which twin they hold dear. Academics, legerdemain, stealth, and subterfuge are all useful, and they're often at 10th generation or lower, and thus possess commensurate backgrounds, and contacts are common. They cling to the road of humanity, but no few walk the road of paradox, which suits their duties well. Clan disciplines, we have Auspex, Obfuscate, and Valeran. Between the three castes, they all share Auspex and Valeran, but the second discipline varies, and here we have Obfuscate. The Watchers keep to the shadows, scrutinizing every detail from hidden safety, so they manifest the third eye if they have at least one dot of Valeran or more. Ironically, they tend to be remarkably short-sighted, having a tendency to fixate on their preferred small details and ignore the larger conceptual picture. They must choose a field of study narrow enough for a knowledge specialty, such as the 10,000 demons, and must succeed on a willpower roll to pass up an opportunity to acquire or study a knowledge of their field, or they'll lose 2 dice from all pools for the remainder of the night. So they have a new weakness compared to the others. Now we have, once again, the true Bruja. So they claim that the Bruja, the other Canaanites know, are liars and have stolen their clan's identity from its rightful owners. They tend to wear clothes that fit in with their current situation, so, fitting their current environs, basically. They're known as scholars or sages. They don't embrace very often, but when they do, it has to be of clear benefit to them. At character creation, they prioritize mental attributes and knowledges. They often use academics and occults. Most true Bruja also teach their progeny how to defend themselves, should it become necessary. Their clan disciplines are potence, presence, and temporis, the manipulation of time, and is a very, very cool discipline, if I do say so myself. Their weakness is that they become dispassionate soon after their embrace, and this only gets worse as the years take their toll. The difficulty of all conscience and conviction rolls are increased by 2 to a maximum of 9. Purchasing ratings in conscience, conviction, and roads cost double the normal experience costs. They divorce themselves from human morals quite quickly. So there you go. I think that's a nice indication of, the improvements made in this book relative to the organization of V20. In DAV20, we've got the bloodlines right behind the clans in the book, which makes a hell of a lot more sense than what we had in V20, in my opinion. Alright, so the roads we walk. This is another part of Dark Ages as a setting that I really enjoy. Vampires, in a period of high religiosity, vampires are not immune to that tendency that mortals have, as they come from the mortal population originally. So they walk different roads of enlightenment, which are described here as equal parts secret society, religion, philosophy, morality, and excuse. And each of the roads has a different view of how a vampire should keep the beast at bay, or embrace it in some cases. And these roads are the equivalent of like Canaanite churches. Can be informal with just, members of a road meeting in a tent to discuss things, or they could have proper congregations and churches and stuff like that. And roads are challenging to walk, so upon embrace, a vampire must adopt a road to stave off the beast, and most will default to the road of humanity, but over time you may choose to walk a different road. Adopting a new road is risky and not something to be taken lightly. If you just started on a new road, you're called an initiate. You understand the guiding philosophies of the road, but you don't really feel it yet. Adherents, you've walked long enough to feel the fundamental truths. so you feel those beliefs. 4 to 7 dots in your road in game terms at that point. Even the eldest and most powerful K-Knights trend toward this level. Mentors, so these are the people that are the teachers of the road and really impart their knowledge onto others. So in game terms, a character taught by a mentor with more dots in the road can raise their road score with 1 fewer experience points per dot between their scores to a minimum of half normal cost. Paragons are not just the teachers, they are ideals. They have an aura of majesty and they convey immense authority in their fields. These are kindred who have 8 or more dots in their road. There's very few of them, and they tend to withdraw from the night-to-night affairs of the general populace because their pursuit of the road becomes an all-consuming effort. And then we have the apostates. So they've sinned against the road, and depending on the road, other adherents might view them with varying degrees of scorn or disdain. Road of Humanity members will look at apostate as just another K-Knight, a failure. But Road of Heaven follower may look at the apostate as a heretic that must be put down for blasphemy. He can also be excommunicated from the road, so a recognized paragon can excommunicate an initiate character. An adherent requires a consensus of 3 paragons to excommunicate. Paragons cannot functionally be excommunicated. Generally, a paragon who has sinned sufficiently to warrant excommunication is simply put down by the road at large. Excommunicated character can remain on the road indefinitely, but suffers a +2 difficulty on all conscience and conviction rolls while she remains on the road. In addition, double any aura penalties. And they talk about how to change roads. So you diminish your virtues, so you abandon levels in your current road through sins against the road, and it's not until you're at a single dot of your current road that you can adopt another. Then you have to take a leap into your new road and experience a moment of truth that allows you to take that first dot of a new road. You'll have to do an extended willpower roll, though, to fight off the beasts. You need a total of 10 successes. If you run out of willpower in the process, then you'll fall to 0 dots in the current road and become lost to the beast. A botch in any of these rolls costs an additional point of willpower per botch rolled. Discussion of road ratings from 0 to 10. You may never roll more dice to resist Rotrek, Frenzy, or any other denial of her beast than she has road dots, and similarly limited in virtues. Then we have different features of the road. You have ethics, the initiation of each road, the organization, and the aura that you present. So this is a personal bearing and a palpable force of presence that embodies the road's ethos. So if you're higher on their road, this gives you a reduced difficulty on rolls due to their confidence and grace in certain situations. If you're low on the roads, this struggle manifests as a personal challenge they must overcome, and thus they suffer a difficulty increase. Every road manifests its aura differently, and indeed every practitioner is subtly different in this expression. They typically apply to relevant social roles, however they may affect any role in which your character's bearing should give an advantage or disadvantage. And then we have a chart here. So if your road rating is 10, you get -2 difficulty modifier from your aura. On the other side, if you have a road rating of 1, you get +2 modifiers on appropriate rolls. Within each road is a list of sins to the road's philosophy. So if you commit those sins, then you'll have to do some rolls. Otherwise, you will lose a dot of that road. Alternatively, you can lose a dot of conscience, conviction, instinct, or self-control. And that's actually required to adopt a new road, as we saw before. So Moments of Truth is an experience that reaffirms your attachment to the road. So there are some catalysts that can lead to this. So if you commit a level 1 to 3 sin on your road's hierarchy, particularly if you make the resulting roll to resist losing a road dot, you can be inspired to advance further. If you undergo Frenzy without risking a dot of your road, you can undergo a Moment of Truth. You can study with a mentor to gain more dots as well, potentially a Moment of Truth if you gain several dots. Or you commit a penance. If you lose a dot or otherwise commit a grievous sin against the road, you can show penance to find meaning and purpose to rejoin with renewed vigor. Finally, there could be just a significant story event at storyteller discretion that reaffirms your connection to the road along your character's journey. To most, Golconda, as we discussed before, is a myth, but to some it's an attainable goal. So what one road will teach of Golconda will be heretical to other roads. Only brave K-Knights will advertise their trek towards Golconda. It may exist, it may not exist. All have heard stories, but these stories share very little in common, and their defining feature is that none can be verified. So it is a matter of just faith. So then we go through the different roads. I'm not going to talk too much about these because I think it's more fun to discover as a player and, pick up the book, give it some real philosophical thought. What does your character believe is the right way to pacify or to coexist with the beast? So we have the Road of Beast. K-Knights on the Road of Beast dismiss the most basic premise of society, that the culture, the people, and those living among each other do not have inherent right as a group to judge each other. Their ethics is used to survive death, and now preservation of the self is the truest goal you can seek. Beast is there to help you survive. It's not a manifestation of evil. So basically, you're the Road of the Beast, you're embracing the beast in a way. There's the Path of the Hunter. This is about the hunt being the center of life as a K-Knight. The hunter begins to think of her next hunt the second she rises at night and falls asleep planning hunts to come. Sins against the hunt, sins against the path of journeys, and sins against liberation, all in the charts here. The ethics of the hunter, basically anything that's not a hunt or meant to advance the hunt is a distraction. The path of journeys is about being mobile and expressing the endless journey of your unique immortal condition. You shouldn't stay in one place and cling to one way of existence because you might as well be dead. Don't want to stagnate. Path of liberation. So civilization isn't just a lie, it's a trap. Vampires were in their truest state before the first city. Humanity is meant to live free, not in cities. So basically they're all about freedom, and they don't want to be structured into Cainite society, or human society for that matter. Then we have the road of heaven. These Cainites feel the mark of Cain as a curse, and they rail against that fate and the injustice it implies. It's a bit different from other roads in that there is no base road, but adherents of the road agree to a core set of beliefs. They believe in a higher power and that it has dominion over all things. They believe that vampiric existence is part of that divine plan in some way. The embrace is a call to direct service of the divine, and serving divine will is more important than your individual will, and following divine law and rejecting evil is the only way to shackle the beast. And each of the faithful, as are known, must choose their own path, which determines more specific ethics and morality that they adhere to. Religion for vampires. We have different paths along these roads. We have the path of Christ, Christianity, the path of life, Judaism, and the path of the Prophet, or Islam. And they all have their own scores for different sins and the rationale behind them. And we have the road of humanity, via humanitas. The idea is to try and remain connected to your human origins. They're known as the prodigals. So remaining human is a requirement to escape soul death, and humanity is the universal experience that all Cainites should understand, so we should hang on to it. Violating the boundaries and well-being of another depletes the soul, so you shouldn't do that. Thoughts and compassion are what separate us from the beast, and that's how you keep the beast in check on the road of humanity. And there are different paths along this road. So the path of breath. So this is about being selfless without being self-righteous. So accepting that your nature is evil makes it true. Isolation leaves you alone with the beast, so that it may overpower you easier. And the company of Cainites is less preferable to the company of kind. So you prefer to be around humans, and you tend to lead a cloistered, thoughtful existence. So hence the breath. You're looking for living, breathing humans to surround yourself with. Path of community. So this is about the needs of the many. Path of community is about surrounding yourself with humanity. The path of community views their herd as kind of their collective responsibility. You can't treat your herd with disrespect as a member of the path of community. On the path of illumination, this is about seeking out the goodness and spiritual brilliance of the vampire's soul. Some see as a fool's errand, but they don't on the path of illumination. So people fear you because finding the truth means the end of their authority. You can only rest once you've escaped the weakness of vampirism, and you have a holiness inside of you that can balance the beast. Then we have the road of kings, the Via Regalis. These followers trace their origins back to the days of Cain, believing that they spring from his oath to God that it is better to rule in darkness than to humble himself falsely in the light. As such, they believe they're mandated by God to rule over mankind. General ethics of kings or the luminaries is that to rule others, you must first become your own master, taming the beast within. Your word is your honor in your life, do not break it. There are only two roles in the world, master and servant, and power does not hand itself to you, you must seize it and hold it. So the road of kings is about Cainites having the divine right to rule and expressing that through seeking out and holding on to power. And among these, we have the further subdivisions of the path of chivalry. So this is a newer path of the road of kings, which emphasizes loyalty, service, and duty over personal power and gain. So they have some additional ethics, valuing your honor and duty. You should aid and protect your inferiors, and you should stand for justice. Then you have the path of Devaraja, which is we saw referred to earlier in the bloodline section. So followers in this path do not believe in divine right to rule. They believe they have to earn the right to rule and rise to divinity in the eyes of their people. So they should act as a god would, smiting your enemies and granting succor to your followers, and never turn away a follower, because worshippers come from all walks of life. How interesting is that? Then you have the path of Diana. So this is related to Zoroastrian beliefs. So there's some additional ethics here that the law is supreme and you should uphold it at all costs. Your duty is your honor and your life, so you should never forsake it. You should always act with kindness, as good deeds will be repaid tenfold. So there's an aspect of kind of karma there. And we have the road of Lilith. So it's a complicated figure with a questionable history that may or may not predate Judaism. Again, there's a lot of interesting stuff to read about Lilith, not just within the context of Vampire Dark Ages, but just in general. And they're known as the witches, the Bahari, the Lilins, or the Ki Sikil Lil Lake. Their ethics, so creation is vital, the act of creation is sacred, and like our mother, you must create often and with daring and cunning. Seduce angels. Creation is suffering, and the greater the creation, the greater the suffering. That suffering is valuable. Life teaches through suffering, so be a teacher. Sounds nasty. Creation is always an act of love and devotion, so be a lover. Rather than learn, some will seek to destroy you and take what you have created for their own. Be a torturer. Draw in the needy, those who have suffered enough to understand, welcome them with passion and wisdom. Finally, cultivate a garden, plant seeds, and feed them with your blood and milk. It goes to their initiation, rituals and observances, their aura, and then we have the Path of Thorns. To these folks, Lilith is a fantastic philosophical concept, and her dogma makes sense academically, but they're not really that concerned whether she's real or not. It's more about taking the study of the faith very seriously, but grounding it in the real world. So wisdom alone for them does not suffice. Intelligence is required. Creation should be built on careful study. Raw creation is never as good as carefully crafted beauty or horror. Do not seek students. They should come to you destroyed and begging. Path of Veils. So these followers reject Cain and all that he stood for. They reject the heavy Judeo-Christian influences in the Book of Nod, seek to slowly disrupt the entire system built on these lies. Lilith is a symbol of defiance and liberty. They believe that the children of Cain will be punished for what they did in the garden, show no mercy for those too ignorant to know the true story of Cain and the Dark Mother, destroy those who disseminate the lie but make all efforts to never be caught, burn their books of lies, i.e. the Book of Nod. You may forgive those who drape veils across the faces of Lilith's murdered children as she forgives them. Then we have the path of making, finally. So for those on the path of making, none of the stories of Lilith are as interesting or as important as those stories where she stole the seed of angels, or was given it, and made a flood of monsters and demons over the vastness of Nod. They're fascinated by the incubi and succubi and how they blended with the children of Seth and the children of Cain. So they seek to find and foster the greatest grandchildren of Lilith, teach them about the beauty of suffering she endured so that they might exist, show them. Make as she did. There's no difference between horrible and divine. Power and uniqueness as expressions of creative force is all that matters. Destroying monsters and demons is no different from murdering infants and fawns, if not worse. Infants will only grow to be people, monsters can become gods. Road of Metamorphosis. So infants become children, children become men, and men become vampires. What do vampires become? That's the question at the core of this road. The vast majority of Cainites who walk it are, no surprise, Tzimisce, whose powers allow them to change themselves and allow them to uniquely explore vampiric evolution. It's a fairly solitary journey. Their ethics involve discovering knowledge for oneself in the purest form is the key to metamorphosis. They want to seek to understand life and death, for it's the cycle that bars transcendence. Indulge the beast and deny it. Like all things, it must be understood. So they want to experiment with the beast, essentially. Experiment endlessly in general, especially upon your own body, to reveal every secret at hand. And do not divorce yourself from the world, for it is what you seek to understand, but do not allow yourself to be dragged down by its entanglements. There are no subpaths in the road of metamorphosis. It's fairly unique to the Tzimisce. We have the road of sin, the Via Peccati. So the appellation of sinner is a deeply ironic one, for Cainites on the road of sin see no power as above themselves. How can one sin against God when one does not acknowledge his authority? Sinners claim this rebellious spirit began with Cain's rejection of forgiveness and acceptance of his curse. But the road truly began in decadent Rome in the days before the Third Punic War. So other Cainites look at the sinners and see slaves to the beast and gluttonous hedonists. There you go. The sinners themselves don't necessarily dispute this. Their ethics are that you're damned already, there's nothing forbidden to you, the beast belongs to you, but you do not belong to it. Act without hesitation, the laws of neither man nor God bind you. Do what you want. Your hunger and your freedom, find the courage to embrace both. Then we have the path of pleasure underneath this. Here we have some additional ethics to tame the beast with the pleasure it desires, for it does not think but only feels. Shame and inhibition are blasphemies against the orgasmic sacrament. Finally, avoid things which bring you no pleasure, for the beast grows restless without being fed. The path of the devil. They're known as the adversaries, and they hold the ethics of being master of yourself. Authority comes from consent of the ruled, not from tyranny. Free will is your ultimate weapon and your greatest treasure. Never let it be taken from you. Chains challenge the rights of the free by their mere existence. Your existence is the answer to this challenge. Then we have the Path of Scream. It's an ancient one. We see that the Bali bloodline are prominent members of this path. This path is all about being in service of hell. So their additional ethics are, you're damned. The greatest pleasure is to be found in service of hell. Virtue is a great and grand lie, but the truth pleases both you and your masters. Your beast is a great vibration carried up from hell. Listen to its will and desires and find your voice of those you follow. Some other paths, including the Path of the Eightfold Wheel, which takes its name from Druidic paganism and is focused on honoring the gods and spirits of nature. There's also the Path of Watchful Gods, and mainly consists of followers of the old Greek and Roman faiths, so fairly rare. But vampires on this path devote themselves to serving the gods through regular sacrifices, honoring and protecting that which the gods deem sacred, and adhering to strict codes of honor. And then they talk about the Christianization of Europe and how it's been a successful propaganda campaign. They also have lists of sins for those two minor paths that were briefly mentioned, in case you choose to go down those roads, but they'll need a bit more expansion from your storyteller and from yourself. And they talk about the pagan traditions of Europe as well, like the Druids and so forth. And there are a couple of minor roads as well. The Road of Bones, Via Ossium. So for most vampires, investigation into the nature of vampirism tend towards practical purposes, such as disciplines of blood magic. The Road of Bones is dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge over all else. Followers wish to unlock the secrets of life, death, and the Cainite condition through a variety of means, most particularly necromancy. Use that as a tool for understanding the threshold between life and death. Others take a historical approach, searching for fragments of the Book of Nod and other historical artifacts in hopes of learning the truth. The Cappadocians are foremost among these. Some Tzimisce and a smattering of Malkavians and morbid Toreador also follow this road. Their ethics are to study the mysteries of life, death, and undeath, explore the nature of the soul, but do not be enslaved by its passions, and protect knowledge from those who would destroy or distort it. We have the Road of Yasa as well. This is the Mongol code of conduct, and they're known as the Blood Brothers. So in the Road of Yasa, you honor your family as you would honor yourself. The family you choose is the strongest and most important family. Demand respect from others, show respect to those who deserve it, but do Do not stain your honor with petty behavior or pride. There are no alternate paths diverging from either of these roads. All right, then we have another 2-pager with atmospheric illustration. I move finally into character creation. So they mention all the different traits that appear on your character sheet. There's some new stuff here. So obviously we have more stuff about the road. We have the aura tied to the road and its rating. Other than that, a lot of this will be familiar if you know about Vampire and V20 in general. They talk about different kind of character concepts and different coterie concepts, then what sort of dichotomies and issues and storytelling hooks exist in the dark medieval world of 1242. So we have conflicts between order and chaos, between good and evil, hierarchy, which is a bone of contention, as we saw for some of the clans. And then there are 5 steps into darkness, they say. So these are the 5 steps of creating character. So you should have your preliminary assumptions. Your character is of an age, gender, and background of someone who could exist in the Middle Ages, obviously. The numbers on your character sheet imply the character, but you breathe life into them and play them out. Every character gets the same number of points to distribute amongst the various traits and abilities, and then you get freebie points. So, you want to make sure you follow things step by step. In the first session, you may not be exactly where you want to be, but you'll always be gaining experience. So don't forget that you can always continually adjust your traits and your disciplines and everything else, and eventually get to a fascinating place with your character. Most traits are on a scale of 1 to 6, and 6 being beyond what many humans could even deem possible. A rating of 2 is average for most individuals, with numbers above rankings significantly better. Some traits rank from 1 to 10. And they are discussed further in the chapter. And also you should keep in mind that this is a cooperative game. You should communicate and cooperate, try to tell a great story together with your troupe and your storyteller. So then we get into the ideas of your overall character concept. And here I think, given all the tips that they've laid out here about character concept, how to work together as a team and so forth, I really feel like this book is more accessible in presentation than V20 for a new player. They give you a lot of ideas here for your character concept. How to choose which clan you would go into, picking a road, your nature and demeanor, choosing your attributes. Those are spoken to directly within the clan and bloodline listings that we saw earlier. They give you great tips on which clans and bloodlines tend to prioritize which attributes and your knowledges and skills and so forth. And then your abilities, much the same. You have tips in each of the clans and bloodlines on how to handle those, your primary, secondary, and tertiary. For your advantages, so now where you're looking at disciplines, so you divide 4 dots among the disciplines listed for your clan, and you can choose disciplines not specific to your clan later, but you can only purchase those with your freebie points. Backgrounds, you have 5 dots initially to divide among them. Again, this book does a great job of letting you know the backgrounds that tend to be prioritized by different clans and bloodlines, which is really, really helpful. And again, it's something that was lacking from V20 in places. Then you have your virtues. So you have 3 virtues, and 2 of them will come specifically from the road you've chosen, or rated from 1 to 5. You start with 1 dot in each virtue automatically, and then you distribute 7 more amongst the 3 virtues as it fits your character. And then you have your finishing touches. So your road score is going to be the sum of your road virtues, which will range from 1 to 10. Then you have your willpower. The average human score is 2 to 3, but they say here specifically that it's wise to raise it to 4 or higher if you want a character to last. Then you have your blood pool, the maximum size of which is determined by your generation. If you spend points on generation, if you had domain or herd backgrounds, you'll get bonuses to your starting blood pool. Then you have your freebie points. That's where you can really put the finishing touches on your character and personalize them to how you want to. And then you need to give them the spark of unlife. So think about the dots that you put into your different attributes, knowledges, talents, disciplines, and all the rest of it. What does that mean for your character? How would they tend to approach different situations, social, physical, different types of conflict? And after that, you should then play your prelude. Basically, each player will get a short interval play showcasing important aspects of who you are, and then eventually those will lead into the gathering of the coterie. And then we have a quick reference for character creation, including quick summaries of all the clans and bloodlines in the book, disciplines, including the unusual ones laid out in some of the bloodlines, like Abombwe, which is the Bonsam gift of predation, the different archetypes for nature and demeanor as well. And there's a load of those, and then your different background options, and the cost per dot for your freebie points for each category of different possibilities. So, attributes, abilities, disciplines, blood sorcery paths, blood sorcery rituals, backgrounds, virtues, roads, and willpower. And then they talk in detail, once again, about the different levels of your attributes and how they manifest in game, what kind of abilities you have at the different dot ratings. They mention you can go up to 6, but they only describe up to 5, but 6 is really kind of where you are dealing with low generation vampires. Then we get into abilities, starting with talents, so things like alertness, athletics, awareness, brawl, empathy, expression, intimidation, leadership, legerdemain, which is sleight of hand, essentially, subterfuge, lying, essentially, Then you have your skills like Animal Ken, so this is your ability to have rapport with wild beasts of the land. Archery, very important as we know for some of the Anda, for example. Commerce, crafts, etiquette, which can be very useful depending on your class and culture. Melee skills, performance skills, riding, which again is useful in the Dark Ages. There's no cars or anything like that. Stealth, which is particularly valued by the uglier vampires, like your Nosferatu, for example. Then you've got knowledges, academics, enigmas. So these are symbolism, history, lore, and cryptography, a kind of new knowledge for the medieval era. We have hearth wisdom, so everyday cures like that healers and herbalists might know about, folk remedies and stuff like that. Investigation, law, medicine. So obviously medicine was not very advanced. Anatomy and physiology are still being developed. People would wear amulets and talk about black bile and the humors and all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't super useful for mortals. We have the occult, of course. Very valuable, particularly to those in the Tremere or the necromantic persuasions. Politics, useful for those in the high clans more than others. Seneschal, basically handling markets and accounts. And then theology, so the science of God. This is particularly important for certain roads and for certain clans depending on their relation to the church. Then we got breakdowns of nature and demeanor. So nature, as you know, is your fundamental nature, and then demeanor is what you portray to the outside. And they have all these different examples here that you can choose from. Deviants, defenders, the judge, for example. You regain a point of willpower whenever you correctly solve a problem by considering the evidence presented, or when one of your arguments unites dissenting parties. So they all have some kind of benefit for you. Then we have the backgrounds. So these are really important, useful stuff that represent relationships, circumstances, and material possessions that you might have. So these include allies, and these are mortals who support you willingly. You might have an alternate identity. Contacts are people that you manipulate or coerce into offering information. We have your domain. So if you have dots in domain, that means you have a physical territory that you control, which gives you benefits to your feeding roles. Fame means you have some sort of recognition in mortal society. Could be good or bad. Generation, obviously, is the potency of your blood. If you have a higher dots in generation, that means you move up from 12th generation. It can go as high as 7th, which would give you 20 blood pool. You could spend 4 blood points per turn and possess traits at 6 dots. Herd as well means that you have a group of mortals from whom you can feed without fear. They do make feeding a lot easier. Players can purchase a pooled herd with background points they pool together. Then you have influence, so that's giving you influence in the mortal community. Mentor means you have a K-Knight or group of K-Knights who looks after you, offering guidance and aid once in a while. Resources are things that your character controls, which could be property or gold or investments or so forth. If you don't have any dots in this, you'll have the very basics and essentials to get by, but if you have some resources, then you can live a flashier lifestyle, essentially. Dots and retainers give you servants and assistants. They could be ghouls, ghouled animals, or people who you've repeatedly dominated and enthralled. They're never completely flawless, so you don't want to treat them poorly because they could turn on you, but you can also create a single more competent retainer by combining points in this background, or players can spend pooled background points on retainers that help the whole coterie. Finally, we have status, which is your level of recognition within the local K-Knight community. Then you have your virtues, that's your ethical codes. So you got conscience and conviction, instinct and self-control, and your courage. These again feed into your different roads and your road ratings. Then you have your willpower. It has a permanent rating and also a pool of points. The rating will be rolled against or tested, and the pool can be spent to do different things. Measured on a 1 to 10 scale, and they attach a sort of descriptor to each of those levels. Your blood pool, so this is just the amount of vitae that you can hold in your body. If you're at a higher generation, you can ingest more blood. You can also use more power of the vitae each turn. Then they give you the experience costs for all these different aspects. And then health levels, these were exactly the same as in V20. Basically, as you take damage and you move down the health track, then you'll get different dice pool penalties, and you'll get movement penalties as well. When you get past crippled, you'll be incapacitated, or you'll be in torpor, or you might be final deathed if you're dealing with aggravated damage. And they talk about awarding experience. Once again, you will get 1 to 3 points of experience automatically each session. You can gain more if you learned something, overcame an obstacle, took a risk, did something creative, made headway in the plot overall, or if you establish some new connections with other characters. They also suggest 1 to 3 experience points per decade past if your chronicle's going on for a long time. Here we have another cool picture and a 2-pager with a bit of fiction tied to it. And then we have gifts of the blood. So here we get into disciplines once more. I'm going to look into the new disciplines we haven't seen before. For others, I would recommend that you look at the book yourself or go back to my video on V20. So Abombwe, this is the unique discipline tied to the Boram. Basically, this dots taps into primal darkness and predatory prowess. The first dot allows you to spend a blood point and sense predators in the area. At 2 dots, you can copy aspects of predatory animals. At 3 dots, you can make yourself a lair in which you can hide inside natural formations, but basically you'll be submerged in the scenery and people can't find you, which is helpful. 4 dots, you'll have power from darkness. You let darkness flow out and over him like black clotted blood that clings to his body. It costs 2 blood points and is automatic. There's no rolls involved, so you can get basically increased strength to your punches, which inflict strength plus 1 aggravated damage. If you cover your head, you gain the ability to see perfectly in normal darkness and a -2 bonus for seeing in supernatural darkness. You can spit a toxin by rolling dexterity plus athletics, difficulty 7. That paralyzes any enemy limbs it touches until the target succeeds at a stamina roll. On the torso, you can sprout 4 spider legs, which allow for additional attacks. Climb actions automatically succeed as well, and running is at a -2 difficulty. You can cover your legs to inflict aggravated damage with kicks, leap up to 10 times the normal jumping distance, and -1 difficulty to landing safely. Or in the throat, you can emit a primordial roar. Mortals and ghouls must succeed at a courage roll, difficulty 9, or flee, while supernatural beings must succeed at a courage roll, difficulty 8, or become weak with terror. So all dice pools reduced by half, rounded up. At 5 dots, you have Predator's Transformation. You slay a predator and consume a part of it, and then become the creature as your vitae fully absorb the essence. Physically transform into the creature you consume. And at 6 dots, you have Incarnate Darkness, so you become a massive darkness, writhing and turning as it tries to emulate predators not known to man. You become the ultimate hunter, both deadly and unseen. It costs 3 blood points, but requires no roll, so the blood bursts from your skin and transforms into roiling darkness. The vampire can take a basic winged shape, allows flight, an insectoid shape, which allows burrowing, or a brutish shape, causing all brawling damage to increase by +1 lethal. In addition, your physical attributes each increase by 3 dots, while all social attributes drop to 0. The Libon becomes the perfect stalker, decreasing difficulty for all of the Libon's perception and stealth rolls by 2. His claws and teeth inflict strength +2 aggravated damage and inject the victim with an inky poison that causes 1 level of damage per turn in living victims until the toxin is nullified. So we have Animalism, which we've seen before in V20, and like the other big disciplines, will go all the way up to 9 dots. We have Auspex, the supernatural ability to see the unseen, and they note as well that if you're gifted with Auspex, you can pierce supernatural illusions and see things hidden from normal sight. So basically, if somebody's using Obfuscate and you have Auspex, you might be able to see through to the obfuscated target. Likewise, you might be able to disbelieve illusions from Shimmerstry. Basically, with other powers, you generally would just make a contested roll. When in doubt, it says the storyteller should favor mystery and ambiguity. So don't just give everything to the Auspex user. Mystery is fun, and it's a horror game. Then we'll go through all the different uses of Auspex. Soul colors, which is, you can see other people's auras and what that means. And as you go further on in Auspex, you can go all the way up to leaving your body, invading people's minds, and further craziness from there. We've got the Bardo. So this is tied to the Children of Osiris. It's tied to the Road of Humanity. The penitent must maintain the Road of Humanity. No other moral code suffices, with dots equal to his Bardo, or lose any levels in excess of his road. Lost levels return as the road increases. With 1 dot, you can restore Humanitas. So if you lose a dot of Road of Humanity, you can attempt to regain it without spending experience points. 2 dots, Banishing Sign of Thoth, and you can turn aside a mystical effect aimed at him coming from either a vampire or other supernatural being. At 3 dots, you get Gift of Apis, so all vampires must consume blood, but here you can use animal blood and it's just as nourishing to you. And once you learn it, this ability is always active. At 4 dots, you have Pillar of Osiris. It's a mystical place of peace at the center of each temple where penitents may meditate to increase their inner calm and magic. Creating the Pillar of Osiris is a night-long ritual, and then you spend willpower points and roll willpower. If you're successful, create the pillar, which is conceptual rather than physical. It reduces the difficulties of all discipline use or other mystical activities, including blood magic, performed at the pillar by 3. This benefit only applies to vampires with at least 1 dot of Bardo. You must visit your pillar once a month or it ceases to function, and for every week you're away from a pillar, the difficulties of all rolls to avoid frenzy increase by 1. At 5 dots, you have Revelation, so you're able to share your wisdom of the vastness of the universe, and this leaves your target unable to act as they ponder this revelation. The listener is immobilized for the scene, but violence toward the victim will end the effect. 6 dots, we have the Boon of Anubis. So you strike a deal, and you can protect a mortal from the embrace. The mortal then sleeps for a full night and day, waking sick but unharmed. Then we have Celerity. As I mentioned, this is handled a little bit differently in this version of the game. So characters add their Celerity rating to their dexterity-based dice pools, including their initiative ratings, and you add your Celerity rating to the number of yards or meters you move in a turn. Additionally, you may reflexively spend 1 point of blood to ignore difficulty penalties for multiple actions. It does not mitigate the dice pool reduction, however. So basically, you get significant benefits limits to your dexterity, dice pools, and your speed, and multiple actions, but you don't get the ability to just wantonly ignore the multiple action penalties and stuff like that you do with celerity in V20. So I think it's a nice evolution of the power. It still makes the power powerful and extremely useful, but it's not completely ridiculous. Then they have advanced celerity, so these are, more individually defined powers as you get ridiculously high levels in celerity. Shimmer's Tree, once again, we have the power to create illusions, which very much follow the pathway laid out in V20, albeit with some different terminology. Daimonian, so this is the Bali path of infernalism, essentially. So this allows you to sense people's sins, inflame your victim's traumas at 2 dots, call on the torment in your blood to hurl a blazing bolt of infernal pain at your enemies. Psychomachia, the vampire combines the ability to read the victim's psyche with the ability to rend spiritual matter, breathing infernal life into the victim's vice, forcing the victim to act the hero and literally battle their inner demons. We got Condemnation. You can importune dark energies into the waking world, levying a curse upon their victim, drawing upon the tormented might of their blood to work their will upon fate. And there's a table here for how condemnation works out according to the number of successes. And we carry on from there with Hellborn Investitures, focus the weight of hell on your victims. At level 6 with Hellborn Investitures, pretty cool. You can get Infernal Wings, Fire Immunity, a demonic form. Basically, you become more and more connected to hell, which is pretty cool. At 7 dots, you can get a Demonic Servitor, and they give you a base template for what that demonic base servitor looks like. And here you can call forth a Herald of Hell, which is even stronger than a Drymalek's Wrath, which plagues a Canaanite victim with the pain of the sun as a full weight of noon bore down upon him. Ouch. Finally, spew wide the pit. Sacrifice yourself to the darkness and open a gate to the beyond. What comes forth devastates and leaves irreparable damage across wide swathes of population. It is a being of hate so pure that it cannot exist in our reality for more than a few scant moments. So the vampire dies when you activate this. An unimaginable monster rips out of their body and causes incredible amounts of damage. A Lord of the Pit is beyond normal dice mechanics and exists as a plot device. Characters encountering such a monster can only hope to run and perhaps save some of those nearby from the resulting destruction. How cool is that? Then we have Dementation, which we've seen before with the Malkavians in the Modern Knights. Some useful storytelling tips as well. In general, you'll find that there's a lot more of these little bits of explanation and clarification in DAV20 than in V20, which I really appreciate, as well as the setting being just awesome in general. And we've got Dominate, which we know about subjugating others' will and even fully possessing them. Flight, which is appropriate for gargoyles, and each dot will give greater speed and capacity for flight. And again, we have another nice sidebar about resisting Dominate. Mundanes basically can't. Vampires can't dominate somebody whose generation is lower than theirs. Different types of nature will affect your ability to dominate them into certain kinds of actions. Fortitude, which, as we know, is about increasing your defenses. And we have Mitherceria. So this is from the Kiasid blood, which is partially Fey in nature. So they get Folderol, allowing them to distinguish lies from truth. Fey sight, Aura Absorption, so you can feed off emotions, touch an object, get impressions off of that object, and then remove them. The Changeling Ward, befuddle anyone who sees it by putting it on an object. And the Riddle Fantastique, you can also steal people's minds and memories at 6 dots and keep those memories potentially. Then we have Obfuscate, which as we know is hiding in the shadows and very useful for the Uggos like the Nosferatu. And it gets crazier and crazier, of course, as you get towards 9 dots. Obtenebration is the power to harness shadows themselves, which is just such a flavorful discipline and so cool. A lot of people, I think, like the La Sombra, specifically just for this discipline. It's just very, very cool in play. And it gets even cooler as you get higher dots. And then we have Ogham, which is, again, the Lianon's variant form of Koldunic sorcery, and it's about their powerful spirit of the land. A shard of that spirit is contained within them. They can use this certain kind of Koldunic sorcery by providing a certain sacrifice. And Ogham is strongest within the wild, so further you are from the wild, the harder it's going to be to perform these powers. Potence, which as we know, from 1 to 5, you just add that many dice to your strength-based dice pools, and beyond that you have specific powers. Presence is emotional manipulation, which is awesome, particularly for socialites. Cause awe, you can cause dread, entrancement, you can summon people to you from anywhere on the planet, which is amazing. And you can create an impression of pure majesty, love, you can paralyze people with a glance, you can spark rage, I mean, it just goes on and on. Protean. So this is about transforming parts of your body. And eventually, when you get to 4 dots, you can choose different animal forms. So they give examples here of vampire and wolf form. +1 strength, aggravated damage with tooth and claw. Difficulties of any perception roll reduced by 2. And you can run at twice your running speed. As a bat, your strength is reduced to 1, but you can fly at speeds of 20 miles per hour. Hearing-based perception rolls are difficulty reduced by 3. Any attempts to attack the bat are reduced by 2 dice due to the bat's small size. You can also be a rat. Small and swift, so the vampire's running speed is doubled. Strength is reduced to 1. Her bite deals strength aggravated damage. Attacks against her small form are reduced by 1 die. So, of course, further powers beyond that, where you can shift into mist, which is just awesome. At higher levels, you can even slumber while you're in the mists, which is pretty cool. Then we have Quietus, the signature discipline of the Assamite clan. As before, this is about assassination. So there are different versions of Quietus now, and you can learn another type. It costs a new rating times 4 XP to learn, and you need a teacher with that style of the power. So first we have Quietus Cruciatus. So it's Hakim's gift to the warrior Assamites. Blood Essence. Sanguinate your victim of all but 1 blood point, and prick your finger and mark the victim's bare chest near the heart. Spend 1 blood point, then make an extended willpower roll. So the vampire's own blood has calcified the heart of the victim into a semi-translucent grayish-white flask known as a debitum. Debitum enshrouds the spiritual essence of the victim, which if examined in detail can be seen encased within, swimming in despair. Heart's blood preserved in this way endures indefinitely. If vampiric fangs pierce it, the heart reanimates, pumping a cupful of celadon-colored aqueous, non-burning flame vaguely resembling the victim into the vampire's maw. Got the Scorpion Touch, so you can transmute the properties of your vitae into a powerful venom that strips prey of its resilience. Then you have Dagon's Call. Twist a victim's vitae against them. Their eyes swell and take on a deep burgundy hue. Muscles seize and veins bulge beneath the skin, and trickles of vibrant scarlet bleed into tiny rivers from all openings in the anatomy. This nightmarish affliction persists until the target collapses in agony or death throes, leaving no trace of the attacker's presence. At 4 dots, you have Baal's Caress, which is a refinement of Scorpion's Touch, so you can transform your blood into an acidic toxin that burns any living or undead flesh, usually accompanied by licking a blade to lubricate it before assaulting an opponent. Then you have Quicken the Mortal's Blood. You can double the effectiveness of each blood point that you ingest from a mortal victim, and then it goes on and on from there. Then we have Quietus Hematus, which is practiced by Assamite viziers. So they have blood tempering. You can instill vampiric vitality into an item drenched in your blood. So you can use this power to conserve both common materials and ancient relics. Truth of the Blood. So this allows a vampire to use the blood of an individual being questioned to divine not only the truth of their words, but the truth behind those words. Cleansed in Blood. You can use the power of vitae to cleanse and restore, allowing it to wash over another and carry away spiritual impurities. It cleanses the target's soul, purging his mind of externally imposed supernatural taints and stains. We have Ripples of the Heart. You can leave an emotional echo that resonates in her own blood or the blood of those from whom she feeds. And then Blood Sweat. If a victim harbors a shred of remorse or pride for actions he has undertaken, a master of Blood Sweat can induce a torrential outpouring of vitae as a sudden rush of sanguinary perspiration soaks the victim's clothes and puddles at his feet. Yikes. And then it carries on from there into increased elder discipline craziness. And they've got this Serpentis. So we know this from followers of Set in the Modern Knights. This is a little bit different, however, in how it manifests. So you have the enchanting gaze aspect at 1 dot once again. At 2 dots, your vampire's jaw becomes ferocious and malleable. Your fangs grow, and yeah, it's all nasty. You get Serpent's Flesh at 3 dots. Then at 4, you can become a typhonic beast, which is a tall jackal with a hard, forked, and spiked tail. Alternatively, she can take a hybrid human serpent form with a long, prehensile tail. Setites use this as a sort of war form in addition to religious functions. So that's different from the modern knights where they become a giant serpent. Here you have a choice of 2 forms, one of which is half serpent. 5 dots, Mother of Monsters, so it allows the Setite to birth small typhonic beasts from your flesh. They grow from your skin, starting by opening eyes and mouths from her flesh, then ripping from her body, taking part of her with them. They have childlike intelligence and understand the vampire's speech, and follow her command without exception, and cannot be commanded or frightened away from their duty. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, here's the stats for a typhonic beast. Their health levels, disciplines. And they share the vampire's celerity, fortitude, and potence powers. And they have +3 soak for their armor. They attack with a bite, a strength +1 lethal, and claws for strength lethal. And then it goes on from there. Then we got the spiritus. So this is speaking with animals, which the Aramanes are good at. Well, it's about speaking to the spirits of animals and objects. So with 1 dot, you get aid from spirits, which will follow your command. You can summon a spirit beast at 2 dots. You can draw part of an animal spirit into yourself, gaining its physical strength or special powers. And the spirit animal must be native to the area. And they give you some examples. So, you can gain the eyes of the falcon, or the ferocity of the cat, or the sound of the cricket, etc. Beastly hunger, so you can consume a spirit from nearby, destroying them, and refreshes your own reserves of willpower. At 5 dots, you get the wild beast. You become like a cat, assuming a half crouch. Your pupils become slitted, and you grow vicious claws in your hand. Mortals see her as a monster if they see her at all. Your strength is raised by 3, dexterity and stamina each by 2, appearance falls to 0, and manipulation is reduced by 3 with a minimum of 0. Your fangs inflict an extra die of damage, and your claws inflict aggravated damage. At 6, you get spirit beast. You merge with an indigenous spirit animal, and their bodies and minds become one, and you can still use your other disciplines as well. Then we got your temporis discipline from the true Bruja, which at the first dot just gives you an innate and unerring perception of time. At 2, you master time perception, allowing you to dilate your mental acuity in response to crisis. So if something bad is happening, you can slow down time to react to it, stuff like that. At 3 dots, you get leaden movement. You can lessen time's flow to a mere trickle, causing those under the influence of this power to perceive time passage in a dizzying blur, and that's really useful as a defensive action. And we have Patience of the Norns. You can now expand your power circumference to engulf multiple targets at once, or localize it on a single focus point to freeze an object in place. Provides both combat and non-combat benefits, obviously. At 5, you have Clotho's Gift. You can accelerate time within yourself, moving at a preternatural speed. Basically, it functions like celerity, with your temporis rating taking the place of celerity where applicable. And it remains active for a number of turns equal to the successes rolled. And unlike celerity, you have a big benefit here, because Clotho's Gift lets you perform any type of action, including other disciplines. At 6 dots, you can go even further. You get limited mastery over the physical age of objects and individuals. You can accelerate the aging process, or unweave entropy, and lessen time's hold. How crazy is that? And it gets even crazier from there. Your manipulation of time. Then we have Valerin, the Salubri's proprietary discipline, and there's different paths here now, since we have the 3 different casts of the Salubri. So the healers, with 1 dot, they sense vitality, and they can instantly read your target's physical or spiritual markers. 2 dots, they can place you into deep and soothing sleep. At 3 dots, you get a healer's touch. It's a kind of laying on hands, like a paladin might in D&D. At 4 dots, you get Shepherd's Watch, so the third eye opens and flares a bright white, illuminating a barely visible ward around the unicorn and his charge, and no foe may breach it. At 5 dots, you unburden the bestial soul. Third eye opens and a shaft of golden radiance lances out, transfixing the victim. Something barely perceptible wafts out of the subject's mouth, drawn into the Salubri's body. It is the victim's soul. So you draw the tattered soul from the vampire into the Salubri's third eye, allowing the healer to repair damage done by the burden of unlife and the beast. That's so crazy cool. Then you have, at 6 dots, the blood is Cain's gift, and Father's Judgment allows you to use your third eye, glowing the silver as Raphael's soft halo, rendering a portion of the target's vitae inert, blocking them from powering their disciplines or healing their undead frame by sheer effort of will. And it keeps getting crazier and crazier from there. Then we have Warrior Path. So here you can sense death. So you sense illnesses and also weaknesses if you want to strike somebody. At 2 dots, you get Morphean Blow. So you use sleep to accelerate the healing process. At 3 dots, you have a Burning Touch. So you inflict pain with your touch rather than healing. At 4 dots, you open the red eye and it blazes with red radiance. Their entire body is enveloped in a web of radiant light that defies wounding. Then you have Ending the Watch at 5 dots. So basically, the third eye flares gold, absorbing the essence of the mortal's departing soul into the Salubri's own. It may be only used on a dying mortal or one who truly wishes death without coercion. And then this gives you some benefits, of course. At 6, you have Samael's Vengeance. Invoking the name and spirit of her long-destroyed progenitor, the Salubri retaliates with superhuman speed and unerring accuracy. Then we have the Watcher cast. They can sense cycles, 1 dot, so they see the cycle of life entire, the ebb and flow of lives in the streets, and they experience waking visions that alter perception of the world around her. Peaceful Touch at 2 dots. You can calm the bloodlust that comes with the violence. 3 dots, Pariah's Caress. You contend with the vampires who do not subscribe to the idea of the lineage of Cain, and learned long ago that the best defense lies in misdirection. Charge your blood with the combined hatred and attention of all her foes, and then transfer that animosity to another with a bloody touch. That's very cool. Peacemaker. So Watchers are arbiters and negotiators. With this power, out-of-control tempers find restraint, and bitter arguments are reduced to differences of opinion. Then we have Soul's Breath. The curse of Cain to subsist on blood and bitter ashes is a lie. Progression of the soul allows one to draw out the sanguine humor that floats within the lungs and the vitality of will in the breath. With the breath comes power, all flowing to the Watcher. Then we have even more crazy stuff for them, and then Vicissitude, which is the body crafting of the Zimichi, and all the horrible stuff that they can do with it. Grotesque thing here. Then we got our Blood Sorcery. So we have Abyss Mysticism, which is generally not compatible with more traditional roads. So basically, Abyss Mysticism is tapping into the power that generates Obtenebration. And the Abyss Mystics are kind of staring back into the Abyss, and you can do some interesting things with it, like you can stare into the Abyss and attune your vision to darkness by harnessing the watchful gaze of Ahriman. You can summon tiny denizens of the Abyss for spying purposes. You can consume the Abyss to accelerate healing. You can also call hungry shades to destroy any vampire foolish enough to summon them. You can do reflections of hollow revelation, so you stare through the darks of the Abyss to view distant objects, places, or people. You can whisper in the dark, which summons and contracts a nocturne until it can fit into the palm of her hand. You can ask it a question, and then you swallow it and catapult your conscience into the Abyss and commune with the alien thoughts of the Abyss to gain an answer. So there's a lot going on there. Then you got your Cold Tunic Sorcery, which we've seen before, and there are new aspects of this, the Transylvanian Kraina. So there's some new magics here. So they can send your senses soaring high into the air or extending beyond your body. So this gives you essentially the powers of the peaks of the Carpathians and their ferocious winds and biting cold. And you can carry them with you. The banks of the Baska, so the surging might of the Baska River, Kupala's exhalation, frigid breaths of deadly gas, and the restless Medias, the ground beneath the village of the Medias will shake and roil, tearing buildings from their moorings. And so basically you can affect a larger area with an earthquake for your number of successes. Then you got a Black Sea Kraina, which have different rites, but again, linked to their place of origin, essentially. Then you've got Necromancy, which once again we have the Path of Bone, Path of the Cenotaph, Path of the Corpse and the Monster, the Grave's Decay, the Path of Haunting. So there's some different possibilities here, but again, I think, given the mystery surrounding blood sorcery, necromancy, and so forth, I'll leave the differences as an exercise to the reader. I think there's some cool stuff hid away in here. And the Path of Ash, the Path of the Twilight Garden, this is from the Lamii, as we know. The Vitreous Path, closely guarded by the Nagaraja. And then we have our list of necromantic rituals up to level 5. Then we have Thaumaturgy, blood magic, and the lesser path, so Cratio Ignis, the creation of fire, the swift journey, Protistas Motus, the power of motion, and the greater path, so the power of the elements, which can allow you to use summon elementals and so forth. We've seen these before. The power of lifeblood, the accursed power, which can corrupt and lay curses. And then we have the thaumaturgical rituals, which of course take longer, but have a more lasting impact, ranging from 1 to level 5. Again, I'll leave these up to you to discover. Quite enjoyable to examine for yourself. And then we have clan-specific thaumaturgical rituals as well. So some of the bloodlines and clans have their own specific rituals. Then we have combination disciplines. So if you have the prerequisites listed here, like Protean 2 and Vicissitude 2, you can get Arsenal Flesh and Bone. So you can form weapons from your own flesh and bone, like blades, spikes, and other crude weapons. And there's a whole bunch of these, which again are really cool. Some of them are crazy. I mean, to have Valerian 5 and Vicissitude 3 is quite a bit of an ask. Same with Dominate 4, Presence 4. But, it's nice to have these really crazy in-depth options when you get to a high level of competency in your disciplines. It just, anything that gives you more player options over time, I'm very much in favor of. And there's quite a few of combination disciplines here. Then we've got some more atmospheric two-pagery. And then we get to the rules. So basically, I'm not going to spend really any time on this. So just flip through to show you the layout. Again, I think it's improved. There's a more easily parsable example of play. Explanations are more compact. There's the use of highlighting in red for particularly important things. I mean, they managed to pack the rules into a nice tight space and make it easy to understand. Likewise with the systems and drama, it's V20, but basically better presented with very little wasted space, yet enough examples and clear enough language that you can understand what you need to get by. Same with explanations of Blood Pool, which works much how you would expect. We have our generation chart here, which is important. And like I said, the highest you can get at character creation is to 7th gen, which gives you maximum traits of 6, and then a Blood Pool of 20 and 4 blood points per turn. Then we have the combat system, which again works the same as before, but remember that celerity works different. That can factor into a hell of a lot more combats than you think, so it's worth remembering. And you have your close combat maneuvers, your weapon traits, the This combat turn summary, again, is the same. We're working with the same basic rules here. But note, of course, for weaponry, we don't have any firearms whatsoever. We have crossbows, slings, longbows, and short bows. And thrown weapons like daggers, javelins, and spears. And your melee weapons are typical medieval stuff like clubs, maces, hand axes, broadswords, daggers, halberds, all that kind of stuff. And your ranged combat maneuvers and your close combat maneuvers change accordingly. And we have a nice summary of your health, the different classes of armor, and the penalties that they can accrue, torpor and applying damage, what happens with final death, and applying damage in general, healing times, then derangements. So these are named a bit differently to reflect the time period. So divine displeasure, like curses upon the mind, and dyscrasias are diseases of the body. So you could be melancholic, phlegmatic, sanguine, choleric. If you're cursed upon the mind, you can have compulsion, lunacy, sacred disease, or St. Vitus's dance. And sins of the soul, you can have sanguinary animism, or visions, or voices. So these are all medieval understandings of mental health, which I think is quite interesting. States of being, you can deteriorate. Diablerie might corrupt you. It does, however, give you the reward of thickening your blood. They go into the perils of diablerie, the perils of faith, disease, fire, frenzy, and Rotschreck, all of which we've seen before. And the tales of becoming mortal through Golconda. The effects of poisons and drugs, sunlight, which don't even mess with it. Temperature extremes, don't mess with it. You know how that all goes. And from there, we have the Storyteller's Guide. They have 10 commandments. Have fun, don't say no, celebrate the players, name storyteller characters, always listen, kill your darlings, embrace darkness and grace, let dice add to your game, communicate goals, and make house rules. I think it's really interesting that that's one of the commandments. They want you to personalize the game for yourself. Take the game and make it your own. Don't consider these rules to be set forever. And if you want to create new stuff that fits in reasonably well, go for it. And again, this book has great tips for storytellers, tips on improvisation, representing other cultures, different styles of playing even, like having a more collaborative style, how you should use the rules, when you should use the rules, you know, using pacing and adventure in a storyline, how to facilitate the story, and creating and using storyteller characters to the optimum, when to use them and how to use them so that players still feel important, and helping players keep track of who they've met, building good antagonists, you know, and storyteller characters as well. And there's lots of examples here. We've got, you know, hunters, midwives, serfs, soldiers, courtiers, outlaws, diplomats, princes, knights, people from the church like priests, bishops, nuns, monks, vampire hunters, and those with the true faith, which is always an issue for the vampires. And they give you the, you know, the manifestation of true faith as you have more and more dots in it. And on occasion, the faithful can experience miracles, or they can use holy artifacts. Yeah, it's a pretty drastic problem for those on the other end of it who can be damaged by such things. Then we have the standard list of basic animals and their stats. Mounted combat, which is handy because that's something that very well might happen in a medieval sense. Then we have some stats for ghouls, some sample demons, and a cool illustration there. That guy's definitely screwed. And then we have charms and exorcism, which is tied into true faith. And we have ghosts as well. And then finally we have some info on the dark medieval world. Again, there's some cool info in here. You know, they talk about key areas, but it's really only about a dozen pages or so, just covering the most basic bits of key parts. So Rus, Carpathia, Lithuania, you know, Italy, Georgia, the Mongols, and that's really it. The rest of the book is essentially your merits and flaws, including supernatural flaws, and then you have your Apocrypha of the clans, so, you know, little bits and bobs that you can use as flavor or additional information about the clans in the dark medieval world. And then we have our huge list of backers for the Kickstarter. And then you have your beautiful character sheet here, which you can see goes up to more dots because who knows what the hell kind of power you might reach. And this sheet has additional pages to allow you to fill in rituals, paths, derangements, expanded backgrounds, all this stuff. And you can find these, of course, in form-fillable PDFs using Mr. Gaughan's website. So there you go. That is Vampire the Dark Ages 20th anniversary. Once again, I would say, you know, if you want to buy a physical version like this, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. I think it was totally worth it. If you don't want to invest that much, buy the PDF, and if you're having trouble parsing the background, then, or if you want to set your chronicle a little bit earlier, then look into Dark Ages Vampire, the first edition, and look at the background stuff for that, which is set at the end of the 12th century. If you want to go a little bit earlier in the 13th century, the Dark Age of Vampire stuff has you covered. And be sure to look at the Dark Ages Europe book for more background info. As well, if you want more detailed information about the clans of medieval Europe, then I would definitely pick up these two books from Dark Ages of Vampire. So A Player's Guide to the Low Clans, A Player's Guide to the High Clans. Really will help you understand the history and the interactions of the high and low clans during that period of time. And it includes, the past before the setting of DAV20 and the current era around that time as well. They're big, thick, nice hardcovers, pretty readily available, although a bit expensive on eBay. And again, always available via the handy PDF format as well. So with that being said, another long video. I hope you enjoyed this, got something useful out of it. I honestly do feel this is even better as a game than V20. I just love the Dark Ages setting that much. I think it's better organized. I think the rules are more compact and better explained. Yeah, the Dark Ages setting offers some interesting challenges and benefits to players as well, so it's a lot of fun to engage in. So, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, feature-length adventure into this particular game. If you enjoyed what you saw, please do leave a like and subscribe, and I want to try and get to 1,000 subscribers soon, so I appreciate any help with that you can offer. And finally, if you do feel like helping me materially in some way, which is always appreciated, if you've got money to spare, I'm happy to accept it. You'll find the link to my Ko-fi page down in the description below if you do wish to donate to the channel. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. Stay well, go out there, play some vampires in medieval times, drain some blood and have a good time, and I'll see you again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye.